to ensure that everyone from the public has a chance to sign on. Thank you. All right, let's get things started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the General Plan Subcommittee meeting of June 17th, 2021. I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. You'll all join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mary, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Chair Mallory.
Present.
Committee Member Bonilla.
Present.
Committee Member Chin.
Present.
Committee Member Maldonado.
Present.
Committee Member Robbins.
Present.
Committee Member Rodriguez.
Here.
Committee Member Wolnick. Committee Member Wolnick.
I think her lips said here.
I think so. Okay. I wanted to take this opportunity to formally welcome our newest committee member, Heather Wolnick, and she is a member of the Park and Recreation Committee. So Heather, welcome. We're really glad to have you here, and we hope you enjoy working on this as much as we all do. I'm going to read a couple reminders for everybody. Due to the physical distancing protocols in place at this time, we continue to encourage public participation remotely. Information on how to provide public comment is explained at the bottom of the published agenda. There are 2 ways to participate. Join the Zoom meeting by clicking on the link at the top of the agenda. Use the raise your hand button to be called on at the appropriate time. Phone-in participation can be done by calling 408-638-0968 with the conference ID number 867-6344-5957, and the passcode is 940314. When the item of interest is opened for consideration, press *9 to raise your hand to be called on. When called upon, press *6 to unmute, state your name, and provide your comments. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for that specific item. Additionally, an option for live transcript is available for this meeting. By clicking on the CC icon on the bottom menu and clicking the Show Subtitle option, alternately, you have the option to stop the feed at any time by clicking Hide Subtitle. New business. Mary, would you read the first item?
Yes, it's election of chair and vice chair.
Thank you. So our terms have expired as on the yearly basis. So we are going to elect a chair and a vice chair this evening for the following year. The first item will be election of chair. If anyone has any nominations for this, please unmute yourself and give us your nomination.
Hi.
Eric?
Well, first, I just wanted to thank you, Ellen, and recognize you for doing such an outstanding job chairing all of our previous meetings. I mean, you were really great, in my opinion, and I think we all owe a bunch of gratitude for your effort and the time you spent on this. So thank you.
Thank
And
you.
with that being said, I don't know if you're up for another go at it again, but I would like to nominate Ellen for chair again this coming year.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Is there a second for the nomination?
I'll second that nomination. Oops.
Perfect.
Or I'll defer to Ramiro.
And Mary, will you call a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Chair Mallory,
I'll abstain.
Committee Member Bonilla,
Yes.
Committee Member Chen,
Yes.
Committee Member Maldonado,
Yes.
Committee Member Robbins,
Yes.
Committee Member Rodriguez,
Yes.
Committee Member Wolnick.
Yes.
Motion carries. I'm the chair still. Okay, so now we're gonna elect a vice chair going forward.
I'd like to make a nomination for the vice chair.
Please,
I'd like to nominate Cliff Robbins.
are there any other nominations? Is there a second for Cliff Robbins?
I'll second.
that.
Mary, will you call a roll call vote, please?
Of course. Chair Mallory,
Yes.
Committee Member Bonilla,
Yes.
Committee Member Chen,
Yes.
Committee Member Maldonado,
Yes.
Committee Member Robbins,
I won't abstain. Yes.
Committee Member Rodriguez,
Yes.
Committee Member Wolnick.
Yes.
Okay. Cliff, congratulations, our new vice chair.
Thank you all.
I'm going to give you a lot of work to do.
Be my pleasure.
Okay. Mary, would you read the second order of business, please?
Chair Mallory, do we want to offer to public comment?
We do. Thank you for the
Okay.
reminder.
Okay.
If there is any public comment on our elections or the individuals elected, do we have any hands raised to make comments?
We have one hand raised. Lori Watnuki, if I will unmute you. Do you have a time limit that you would like for this?
1 minute, please.
Okay. Okay. So Lori, I'm unmuting you and then I'm going to start a timer. Lori, can you go ahead?
Hi, Mary. Could you just, I've got a technical glitch here. I cannot lower my hand
Okay.
on my, so just ignore it.
Okay.
Please. It's a technical glitch.
That's
Thank
fine.
you.
I will lower your hand and if it stays up, I'll just leave it
Just
expecting for the next
ignore
one.
it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll close public comment period on that. Thanks for the reminder, Mary. Would you read our second item of business?
Yes. It is draft land use and circulation alternative presentation.
Thank you. Julia, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Mallory. My name is Julia Klein, Project Manager for the General Plan Update. And with me this evening, we've got several staff members. I'll go ahead and go through them, just a quick introduction. Christina Horsberger, our Community Development Director. Zach Dahl, our Deputy Director. Additionally, we have Brian Alexander, Linda Lee, and Bethany Lopez, staff with the City of San Mateo. Also with us this evening is Joanna Jansen and Carrie Stone with PlaceWorks, the lead consultants for the general plan update, and Zachary Zabel and Brian Manford with Nelson Nygaard, and they are with the circulation subconsultants. So with that introduction, I want to go ahead and hand it over to Christina and Carrie, who will be doing the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Christina Horsberger, Community Development Director for the City of San Mateo. I'm going to go ahead and start off our presentation with just a quick overview and recap of where we've been so far, and then I will hand it over to Carrie Stone with PlaceWorks, and she will give you an overview of what the working session tonight will entail. And so, can we go back to the other slide? Thank you. So once we're done with our presentation, we will have a public comment period for the working session tonight. So that will be followed by subcommittee questions and answers to the first part of our presentation, and it'll be followed by the in-depth general plan subcommittee presentation that gets feedback on the land use alternatives that are going to be presented to you tonight. And after that, we will wrap up and adjourn the meeting. And so I want to give just a quick overview of what we've done so far, recognizing that many people on this meeting have been keeping up with the general plan 2040 update, but some may not have. So I'm going to go ahead and just give a high-level summary. What the general plan is, it is our guiding land use document. It's required by the state. It's made up of a series of chapters which cover different topic areas for land use in a city. Every city has one. And it guides land use and the built environment in the city and everything that supports that. So thinking about the buildings, the streets, the infrastructure that's in the city, where things are located, how they look, where we have different amenities and things throughout the city. And so we update those plans about every 20 years, and we do it with guiding principles that are developed through working with our community. So in this case, we started our general plan 2040 update in 2018, and we started by defining the values that the community wanted to see reflected in the general plan, and by developing a vision statement that reflects those values. So those values are diversity, balance, inclusivity, prosperity, and resiliency. And the vision statement that was developed is that San Mateo is a vibrant, livable, diverse, and healthy community that respects the quality of its neighborhoods, fosters a flourishing economy, is committed to equity, and is a leader in environmental sustainability. So that brings us to our status update. So as I mentioned, we started our general plan 2040 update in 2018. We developed our values and our vision statement, and then we followed up by defining study areas, which are 10 areas located throughout the city that we thought were the ripest areas that would see the most amount of change in the near future, the time of the general plan life cycle. And we then developed a series of land use alternatives, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Up until March, we had been working at a fairly steady clip on that. We had one workshop in March of 2020 on the land use alternatives, and then the pandemic hit. And so at that point, we went into a shelter in place. We switched gears a little bit. We kept working on the general plan update, but we did more internal staff types of activities, and we held off on our outreach for a while as we adjusted to life in the pandemic, to adapting to the virtual world, and also because we knew that there was an upcoming election and that would impact some of the considerations for the general plan. And we also knew that our regional housing needs allocation would be released. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the regional housing needs allocation, what that is it is an allocation or a number of housing units that is set to us from the state that tells us how many housing units within the city we have to provide a pathway for. So not that we're going to build them, but just that we have to have zoning in place and policies in place that can allow for them. And so we were waiting for those things to happen because we knew that they would have an impact on the discussions that took place regarding the general plan. And so we waited for that, got our numbers in December, and then in January, we went back to the city council to provide a status update on what we had done during the pandemic, on some of the considerations resulting from the stuff that happened in fall and winter. And we got the green light to move forward and resume our outreach and to resume our workshop with the land use alternatives. So since that time, we have been embarking on some outreach, which I will go over in a little more detail in a few slides. And so a little bit more on where we are now and on what our timeline looks like. So our goal for completing the general plan is the end of 2023. So by January 2024, we expect to have our general plan in place. And that includes, or as I should not say in place, but at least completed. And so at this point, we are looking at the land use alternatives. You'll get more information on that in terms of the type of input we're looking for tonight, which is, do our alternatives cover the right range of uses and do we leave anything out? After that, there'll be an evaluation period where we create a preferred scenario based on the input that we hear on the land use alternatives that are currently being considered. We'll work more on the goals and policies, and then we'll be doing an in-depth environmental review where we'll look at all kinds of technical information and the impacts of everything we've heard that's gone into the draft of the general plan that we decide to move forward with. While that's happening, concurrently, the housing element, which is one of the chapters in the general plan, needs to be updated. So that was the element that contains our housing needs allocation, which is the allotment that I mentioned earlier. And for this series for the RHNA, which is an 8-year cycle and takes us through 2031, we have about 7,000 units that we need to plan for. The housing element needs to be updated ahead of the general plan, and that's expected to be completed by the end of 2022. And so just to give an overview of who we've been talking to community stakeholders from as many different groups as we can reach. That includes residents of all types, whether they own property or rent. It includes businesses, proprietors, owners, people who work and hang out in San Mateo, but may not necessarily live here. People who build things in San Mateo and have an interest in land use in San Mateo. Basically everyone who lives, works, and plays here, and also representatives of folks who can't participate on their own due to a multitude of potential reasons. A lot of people have mobility issues or time commitments, or just, have things going on in their life that make it difficult to participate. In some cases, there may be communication barriers. And so we're really trying to reach everyone. And we do want to hear from all segments of the community because we think they all have a stake in the general plan. And so the way we've heard from people in the past is through community workshops, sort of like the one we're doing now. We've had the subcommittee meetings, but we've also had dedicated workshops that were solely for the purpose of community input. We had a series of those in developing the steps in 2018 and 2019, all the way up to March of 2020. We've also done a bunch of pop-up events where we've gone to where people are. So we did the Nights on B Street, we've gone to field work, we've gone to different community events, and we'll continue to do that. We've done intercept surveys where we talk to people on the street and ask them questions and try to get feedback that way. We've had surveys and different online exercises. We've talked to youth in government. We've reached out to the school districts and are planning to do more to reach the youth. And so we're also trying to target folks who for whom English might not be their first language, and trying to get our messages refined so that we can reach more people that way. We've talked to neighborhood groups and we've done a mass mailing, and we're planning to do more things in the future. So we've tried to reach out in a bunch of different ways, and we're constantly thinking of more, and we'll be doing more, and we'll be doing more targeted outreach as well as a statistically significant survey moving forward. And so since our council direction to go ahead and recommence with our general plan outward facing activities, we've had a series of meetings. Many of them, we went to where people were. We also held some where people could come to us, including 2 general plan recap sessions, because we recognized that a bunch of time had gone by, over a year since we had talked to folks, and we needed to bring everyone back into the conversation and back up to date with what the general plan was, why it's important, and to invite new people to the conversation and bring anyone who might have been a little rusty back up to date. And so following that, we recommenced with our land use alternative workshops. Originally, we had planned to have 3 in total, but since so much time had gone by since the shelter in place and we had only had 1, we decided to have 3 additional ones. So we had a total of 4. During that time, we also, as I mentioned, had the housing element numbers published. And so we have a county consortium called 21 Elements, which helps the cities in the county to maneuver through their housing element activities. And we had a couple of workshops that were dedicated just to the housing element as well. And so again, we continue to promote in different ways. So some of the things we did already, I mentioned where we actually talk to people, but we're also looking at ways to get people to participate. And we do that in a variety of ways as well. So we post things on social media, we hand out flyers. We've been reaching out to more businesses and different groups that can help us get the word out through mailers and email blasts. We're trying to reach parents of school-age kids. We're trying to reach folks who rent and may not always be getting the information that we're sending out. And we're doing print ads in the Daily Journal. So we're looking at more ways to reach people and to get people to participate. To date, as I mentioned, we've heard from a lot of folks. We have a lot of raw data. We will synthesize it when we have all of the data and all of the input from the community, from the subcommittee members, and from the Planning Commission and City Council. Some of the major themes, though, that we've heard so far that are of concern to people or that people want to see some more discussion on are traffic congestion and safety, affordable housing, transit improvements, sidewalk, crosswalks, and street lighting, parking. So obviously a lot of things that have to do with our road network and community events, activities in parks. And so when you get to the technical part of your presentation this evening, you'll get a little bit more information on some of those themes as they relate it to some of the specific study areas. But before we get to that point, Carrie Stone from PlaceWorks is going to take over the presentation, and she's going to provide an overview of what's going to be entailed in the rest of your evening and give you some information that will help you to have that discussion. So with that, I will hand it over to Carrie.
Thanks, Christina. Okay. So the alternatives process is a very important step in the general plan update because it's how we guide decisions about changes to the land use map and circulation system. The general plan land use map provides the overall guidance for what can be built where and sets the groundwork for regulations in the zoning code and other documents that determine how San Mateo will look and feel. Every parcel of property in San Mateo has a color on the general plan land use map, and that color determines what can and cannot be built on that property. So this map is very important. The land use alternatives are our tool for exploring and evaluating potential changes to this map before any decisions are made. When we entered shelter in place in March 2020, the general plan update was in the midst of a series of community workshops, as Christina mentioned. We started by choosing study areas, identifying where we would like to focus consideration of potential changes. The study areas are most likely to change and/or most able to accommodate new development due to access to transportation, services, and infrastructure. After lots of community input over the summer and fall of 2019, the City Council gave direction on 10 study areas. Then, with further community input in fall and winter 2019, we created a range of alternatives for each study area. In spring 2020, we took the 3 draft alternatives, A, B, and C, back to the community for review just before the pandemic paused everything. In January 2021, we went back to the City Council to confirm that these 3 alternatives remain valid and to restart the community input process. In May 2021, we provided an update to the Council and received direction to expand outreach by developing a targeted approach in communities whose views we may be missing. The next step will be an evaluation that compares the 3 alternatives, which I'll describe in more detail. Based on the evaluation, we will work through a series of community, general plan subcommittee, planning commission, and city council meetings to formulate a preferred scenario based on mixing and matching pieces from the alternatives to become the basis for revisions to the general plan land use map and the future transportation network. I want to briefly clarify some of the terms we've been using. We use the words alternatives to describe the different ideas we're exploring now in alternatives A, B, and C. We use the name preferred scenario to describe the outcome of this process. And just a reminder about our process. At each step of the alternatives process so far, we've been through a round of community input, general plan subcommittee input, planning commission input, and city council review and direction. Currently, we're in the process of finalizing the range of alternatives for evaluation. The land use alternatives evaluation will consider a number of topics that are very important to San Mateo stakeholders, including those listed on this slide. This evaluation will shed significant light on the pros and cons of each alternative. We're not choosing among alternatives tonight. That process will begin after the alternatives have been evaluated and we share that evaluation with the community. No decision on the preferred land use scenario will be made until the evaluation is complete. So we're here today to get general plan subcommittee input on whether this is the right range of alternatives to evaluate. The steps of debating the pros and cons of the alternatives and choosing among the alternatives will come in the next stage of the process. These three maps that you see on the screen show the land use alternatives A, B, and C side by side. We'll walk you through them at a much higher level of detail. All three alternatives are based on the same 10 study areas approved by the council, which are these colored areas on the maps. The alternatives explore a range of possible land use changes within those 10 study areas. Areas outside of these 10 study areas are covered by the general plan, and they can and will see some changes over the next 20 years. For example, significant changes in state law have made accessory dwelling units, and you may know those as in-law units, are much easier to build. So we expect to see many new ADUs built in single-family neighborhoods. So here are some of the big picture differences between the three alternatives. Alternative A generally has the least change in designations and the lowest residential growth. Alternative B has the second highest residential growth and spreads growth and mid-range heights more evenly across all 10 study areas. Alternative C has the highest residential growth and concentrates growth, change, tallest heights, and density near transit in study areas 3, the rail corridor, and 4, downtown. Alternative A includes about 10,900 new homes within the 20-year life of the general plan. Alternative B includes about 15,800 new homes, and alternative C includes about 20,800 new homes. All three alternatives include around 15,000 new jobs, as you can see in the bottom row of this table. We asked our general plan team economists to consider the potential changes in housing and employment patterns as a result of COVID-19. And we do still feel that over the 20-year life of the general plan, these numbers are valid benchmarks for the range of possible futures. A number of questions about Measure Y came up during our workshops. Measure Y was passed by voters in November 2020. It extended height and density limits on new residential development. It has a sunset date of 2030. This general plan looks out beyond that sunset date to the year 2040. Therefore, some of these ideas will explore land use designations that would allow buildings with 6 or more stories, particularly in study areas 3 and 4 near the Caltrain station. We also have 3 possible circulation alternatives. These are broken down by study area because the transportation network needs to be thought of as a holistic citywide system. All the alternatives assume pedestrian and bicycle improvements consistent with existing city planning documents. Any of these 3 alternatives could be tailored to fit the preferred scenario. We're going to review each of these in more detail and at a larger scale, but I'll briefly describe them. Alternative A prioritizes pedestrian corridors, pedestrian improvements to challenging intersections, and implementing traffic calming and safety improvements near highway on-ramps. This alternative envisions a 2-block pedestrian-only street downtown. Alternative B aims to increase and improve transit access to and from major connections in San Mateo by adding new east-west transit connections to the Hillsdale Caltrain station, prioritizing dedicated HOV and bus lanes, and adding bus rapid transit improvements to El Camino Real. Alternative C would create a pedestrian-focused car light space downtown. In addition, this alternative would explore an automated micromobility circulator, such as an autonomous vehicle shuttle within city limits. In a little bit, we'll have 4 rotating presenters provide an overview of the alternatives to the General Plan Subcommittee. Using screen share feature on Zoom, the presenters will show you draft alternative maps for each study area and the maps of the circulation alternatives. When you look at these maps, you'll see a lot of different colors. Each color represents a land use category, and I'm going to walk through each of those colors and corresponding land use categories now to make sure everyone on the General Plan Subcommittee and in the audience can understand the maps we're looking at tonight. The colors and land use categories are explained on something we call the place type menu. And this menu has words and pictures to explain what kinds of development might happen, and it corresponds to each of the colors on the land use alternatives maps. You receive the place types menu as part of your packet, and you might want to have it available during the discussion. Yellow, orange, and brown represent residential categories. Darker colors represent greater intensity in both density and in height. The blue colors represent mixed use categories, such as restaurants or shops on the ground floor with offices or apartments above. Again, the darker colors represent greater intensity. The acronym FAR used in these categories refers to floor area ratio, which is a way of measuring how much space a building can take up on a site. It's a commonly used measurement for the amount of commercial development, as opposed to measuring units per acre for residential development. Reds and pinks are pure commercial categories with no mix of residential. Bright red is commercial neighborhood, such as restaurants, salons, or gyms. Pink is commercial service, such as automotive repair shops, vets, or self-storage. And rusty or brick red is commercial regional, such as the Hillsdale Mall or Bridgepoint Shopping Center. Purple and magenta are pure office uses, with darker colors representing greater intensity. Lavender is office low of 1 to 3 stories, magenta office medium of 4 to 7 stories, and dark purple is office high of 8 stories or more. Gray colors represent industrial uses. Dark gray is traditional light industrial or warehouse development of 1 to 2 stories. Light gray includes research and development uses, including labs, maker spaces, and associated office space. These could be up to 3 or more stories. Green colors are for various types of parks and open space. A green P inside a circle means that the area would include a publicly accessible, privately maintained open space like a courtyard, lawn, or plaza. All right, I'm almost done. I'm just going to wrap up on the community input we've heard so far. We've received a lot of input so far, and we're still in the process of having public meetings like this one. So we're still analyzing and synthesizing the input, but this will give you a sense of what we've heard. These are the 2 questions we asked the community at the in-person open house and at the virtual workshops. Is this the right range of alternative scenarios? And are there ideas or changes missing that you'd like to see evaluated? We also offered guidance on the feedback that can help us refine the draft alternatives, which you see on this slide. And we have the same questions for the General Plan Subcommittee tonight. So this is some of the big picture community feedback we received. And as you can see, we heard a broad range of ideas at our workshops and through the online survey. Some people urged us to expand the study area boundaries, while others do not want the boundaries to be changed. We heard comments asking for more housing and higher densities, and also comments that want lower density or even no new development at all. Several themes emerged in concerns about the potential impacts of new development, including a desire for buffers between residential and commercial uses, doing something to mitigate traffic impacts and make bicycle and pedestrian improvements, ensuring sufficient infrastructure and public services, protecting historic resources, adding more open space in parks, and maintaining a balance of jobs and housing in San Mateo. And I'd like to note for our audience that the General Plan Subcommittee packet included a more detailed summary of community input, as well as a link to the raw input of workshop notes and survey responses. This table gives an overview of the community events we've had so far. As Christina mentioned, we had 1 in-person open house back in March of 2020, 3 virtual workshops in April and May of this year, and an online survey that was available from mid-April to the end of May. To understand who was participating in our process, we asked the workshop participants a series of questions, which I'm going to summarize now. As shown in this graph, most workshop participants in San Mateo were San Mateo residents. Many also work here and own property here. We started asking about renters specifically at the last workshop, and 12% of these participants identified as renters, which contrasts to about 46% of households in San Mateo who are currently renters. We also asked about how people heard about the events, and most people heard about the workshops through the email newsletters. At the first workshop, we were excited that almost half of our participants were first-time participants in the general plan update. And you can see here that the proportion of first-time participants decreased at the second and third workshops. The vast majority of participants preferred learning about the general plan through email newsletters. And most participants live in zip codes 94403 and 94402. So this concludes my portion of the presentation, and I'm going to turn it back to the chair now.
Thank you, Carrie. Are there any questions from the GPS at this point on Carrie's presentation? Hearing none. We will open the public. Eric, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Just a quick question for alternative A. Was that basically the scenario that maximized housing, but still just squeaked by measure Y? Or was there more room to get more housing under measure Y under that scenario? I just wanted to get a little clarification on that one.
Joanna or Carrie, would you like to respond, or would you like us to respond?
I'm sure I can take a stab at it. Under alternative A is the most consistent with measure Y, as Carrie noted. And whether or not there could be a little bit of additional units, probably it's not. Certainly for any of the alternatives, it's not the thought that every single parcel, is raised to the ground and built up to its maximum allowable height. So there's probably some additional capacity there, even under measure Y restrictions in alternative A.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Heather, did
Yes,
you want to unmute?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, can.
Okay, great. I have a question just in general about the designations. So have we considered at all, I guess our, residential, commercial, and all those levels, is that very standard? Or have we considered or talked at all about breaking it up into pieces? For example, like with the commercial, having, kind of a subset of commercial be like essential services, including grocery stores, that kind of thing. Or is that generally not done in this process?
I was wondering if Joanna or Carrie would like to take a stab. Otherwise, Christina.
So I would say that the different types of commercial land use categories are specific to different types of commercial uses. And so the different designations would connotate the type and variety and mix of uses that would be there. And so they generally come sort of in degrees. Your neighborhood kind of commercial uses would be more of your day-to-day kinds of needs. Then you have your regional or your community types of commercial, which have higher level needs, things that people would come to from a wider service area. So is that sort of what you're wondering? I don't know if that
yeah, I think so. Because it kind of still seemed like it was by height a bit, how many levels, but it sounds like I was misunderstanding that it's more by use.
So there's different things that we'll be looking at. And so when we look at the different types of uses, the different categories of uses, they are associated with different types of intensity of how those will come about. And we will get into the specifics of that later on when we get into the zoning code. After we figure out what the general plan is going to look like, then we start looking a little deeper at things like heights and things that can go in places. But the less intensive ones, like the more neighborhood kinds of commercial uses, would typically be associated with less intensity, so lower floor areas and height limits and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. We're going to move on and open up the public comment period, and I'm going to read a statement in advance of that. During the public comment period, members of the public may speak on the item on the agenda. For those in attendance this evening, please raise your hand now to indicate that you would like to speak. We'll give a couple of minutes for attendees to raise their hands. In the meantime, please know that the GPS members have read the agenda packet. With that in mind, we're asking speakers to be concise with their comments. For example, if someone before you has made the points that you agree with, simply say that you agree with the previous speaker or the name of the speaker. This will also help ensure that we hear comments and ideas from new participants. Mary, would you provide a count of the number of people who raised their hands at this point?
So Chair Mallory, they're still coming in a little bit, but I have 3 hands raised at this point.
3 hands. Okay, let's give it another minute or two. We'll sort of have a little mini recess here until people have a chance to raise their hands.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead and read some more information. Given the number of speakers and to ensure that everyone has a chance to speak within the time we have, that will determine how long we set the timer for. This means that each member of the public may speak for a maximum of that time limit. Do the GPS members agree with that process? Nodding heads. Okay. Hand check, Mary.
So I still see 3.
3. Okay. Why don't we set the timer for 2 minutes for each individual?
Actually, I only have a 3-minute and a 1
Okay, then
minute.
why don't we, then let's do a 3 minutes since we have 3 hands.
Okay.
I had to pick one that you didn't have. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be any
Sorry.
fun.
Okay.
And then I'm going to reiterate to those who are joining us that when the item of interest is open for the consideration, which is now, and you're called on, press star 9 to raise your hand. When called upon, press star 6 to unmute, state your name, and provide your comments.
Okay.
All
So
right.
our first commenter, let me just show myself so I can do the timer. And our first commenter is Lori Watanuki. Lori, you can unmute yourself.
Technical problem. Can you just ignore my hand for the entire meeting? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next speaker will be Lisa Nash. Lisa, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. And the timer started. It's the countdown, and go ahead.
Great. Thank you. And thank you to the subcommittee for meeting, as you are an important voice of the public in this process. Staff has worked very hard to try to get the word about the general plan, but it is a complicated process. So I encourage the subcommittee to continue to explore creative ways to continue this public outreach focused on input workshops in addition to educational workshops targeted specifically to understand how people's lives have changed as a result of living through the pandemic and how that has changed what their issues and priorities look like. The answers may be nuanced, but they will be important in guiding the general plan. Everyone has been impacted by the pandemic in multiple ways. So how we address the critical need for more affordable housing, creating an economic environment that leverages these changing trends, ensuring sufficient open space while also meeting our arena numbers, building a more vibrant civic opportunity selection, and translating all general plan efforts into Spanish to expand our outreach. All of these with a post-pandemic lens. These are just a few of the examples I asked you to be focused on as you review these alternative use scenarios and your work in general going forward. Thank you all very much and good luck.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, so our next and looks like last speaker at this point is Adam Nugent. Adam, you can unmute yourself.
Good evening. Thank you to everyone for all the work that you put in thus far. It is a monumental task, and I'm excited to see what happens in our future. I live in the North Central neighborhood. I am the president of the Home Association of North Central. I'm speaking as a resident and the leader of the neighborhood, but I'm not necessarily speaking on any sort of official behalf. What I do want to note, and I think that this should be very aware and present in the minds of the General Plan Subcommittee, is that our neighborhood of North Central is basically surrounded and included in multiple study areas. It's almost like a mouth in which the fringes of our neighborhood are part of study areas on basically all four sides, and the center is basically not a study area. Unique to perhaps any other neighborhood. We are also unique as a neighborhood where community leaders have come forth and have supported change if it's done equitably throughout the city. What I want to highlight tonight is particularly the R2 neighborhood, the R2 zone, tucked between 101 and more or less the train tracks and 3rd Avenue. This zone is mostly renters. It's a large percentage of renters. There's a lot of mix of housing, some of it in very poor shape. Some of it is overcrowded. And these renters, many of them are very heavily facing displacement pressures. And their portion of our neighborhood, which I live in, is also surrounded by study areas. One thing that I want everyone to consider is what happens to this portion of our neighborhood? And do we have a plan for the people in this neighborhood? Do we have a plan for the structure and infrastructure in this portion of the neighborhood when we propose redeveloping or new development surrounding it? This is a very challenging and deep topic that you're not going to solve tonight. However, I worry that we're going to just ignore these problems by not considering them. And it is really important that we don't do that. I'm not proposing any particular solution, but that R2 zone of North Central is especially sensitive, and we need to have solutions in place for that. It's been long neglected from a financial and investment standpoint, and it is very much gentrifying. So please consider what we do around on the edges of my neighborhood and what's going to happen at that core area. Again, thank you for your time. And I care very much about the outcomes and the process, and I appreciate the hard work. I don't envy anyone involved. You'll do great. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for your comments. Okay. We will close public comment unless there are more hands, Mary.
No, that is
Okay.
that
All
is it.
right. Then we will move on to the subcommittee discussion. And Julia, would you like to take over?
Thank you, Chair Mallory. So this portion of the meeting will be shared with Brian Alexander going first for a group of the sub areas, followed by myself for the second group of sub areas, and then Linda Lee for the third group. And then finally, the circulation alternatives will be facilitated by the Nelson Nygaard consultants, along with city staff being available for questions as we go through each of the different group discussions. So with that, I'll hand the mic over to Brian.
All right, thank you, Julia. So good evening, members of the General Plan Subcommittee. My name is Brian Alexander, and I'm a Senior Management Analyst in the Community Development Department. So as Julia mentioned, this next portion of this item is a more in-depth presentation and discussion of our study areas and the land use alternatives. So as a reminder, while we are going to be presenting some high-level feedback from the community in this presentation, this session is largely about collecting feedback from you, the members of the General Plan Subcommittee. And just to reiterate what kind of feedback we are looking for, we ask that you keep these 3 questions in mind tonight as we present. First, is this a representative range of alternatives? If not, what new ideas and changes should we add to ensure we do have a representative range of alternatives? And then finally, do you have any additional ideas or changes to what is included in the packet or in the presentation tonight? So as Julia mentioned, we've divided our 10 study areas into 3 groups, and then we also have a 4th group that includes our circulation alternatives. The way this portion of the presentation will work is I will run through a set of 3 study areas, which are 1, 3, and 8, which is included as the first item here on this slide. We'll then take time to have a discussion about any of the particular study areas I've presented, and staff can answer any of your questions. And after about a half hour or so, or after we've collected all of your comments or feedback on these study areas, whichever comes first, I will hand it off to my colleagues who will in turn present their groupings of study areas, answer your questions, and collect your feedback as well. And then once we've covered all of the study areas and the circulation alternatives, we will wrap up and discuss next steps. So just to review the packet materials, last Thursday, the General Plan team provided the General Plan Subcommittee and the San Mateo community background information about the draft alternatives process, along with a summary of the community input from the workshops, online survey, and emails and letters submitted to the city. As part of our overview of the land use alternatives by study area or by circulation alternative, we will present a high-level summary of the input we received. Although we won't be going over every individual comment tonight, the GPS did receive links to all the comments the city has received so far as part of attachment 6 in tonight's packet. So I'll pause there for a second just to ask if there are any clarifying questions, and then we can jump into the study areas. Okay. So as I mentioned, I have 2 portions of study area 1, study area 3, and study area 8. So my 2 portions of study area 1, it's the area including and surrounding El Camino Real in the central and southern portions of San Mateo. Study area 3 is our largest study area, includes Hillsdale and Hayward Park Caltrain stations, the event center, Bay Meadows, Hillsdale Shopping Center, and all of El Camino Real from 17th Avenue down to 36th Avenue. And then lastly, study area 8, which encompasses the 92-101 interchange, and then several adjacent parcels, including Parkside Plaza, the San Mateo Marriott, and Crossroads San Mateo. So we're going to start with the central portion of study area 1. And as I mentioned, it runs from just south of Central Park, so 9th Avenue, down to about 17th Avenue on El Camino. So I'm going to run through the main differences and the 3 alternatives here for this study area. So most of the land use differences that you'll see are focused in the southern half, south of about 12th Avenue. So as you can see, alternative B has several parcels that are designated as a residential high, which are these brown colored parcels here. And then a mixed use high designation here at the southernmost portion. All 3 alternatives are mixed use of varying intensities north of 12th Avenue, and have at least 1 parcel that's designated as office high, which is the dark purple color in all 3 alternatives. Again, you've received a full range of input as a link in your packet, and we've received a few hundred pages worth of comments that you can view in full. We are still collecting and synthesizing this feedback, but tonight we wanted to summarize some of those high-level comments we heard from the community about each of the study areas. So with regard to this portion of study area 1, we heard from some to add more high-density residential, with others wanting more mixed use. We heard also a desire to potentially reduce office uses. And then, as Carrie mentioned, we've heard some sentiment to expand the study area boundaries. And then the primary concern with this study area is mostly related to parking, traffic, and circulation concerns. So next is study area 1, the southern portion here, which runs along El Camino from 36th to 40th Avenues, and then also includes this block of commercial here on 37th Avenue. So as you can see, all 3 alternatives contain some combination, mostly of neighborhood commercial, mixed use low, and some residential designation. Alternative B here has mixed use low all along the western side of El Camino, while A and C have some combination of neighborhood commercial and mixed use low. It's just a matter of where along that frontage it's located. 37th Avenue is different across all 3 study areas. In study area or alternative A, it's neighborhood commercial. In alternative B, it's residential low. And then in alternative C, it's mixed use low. And then again, some high level comments here for this study area. Some expressed a desire for a lower density option in one of the 3 alternatives. Others thought that they would like to see more residential or mixed use. And then the primary concerns were around job and business retention, parks and open space, and maintenance of historic resources. So study area 3, as I mentioned, is our largest study area. So we put each of these alternatives are on their own slide here, so it makes it a little bit easier to follow and to see. As I mentioned, it includes the areas around Hayward Park and Hillsdale Caltrain stations, all of El Camino from just north of 17th Avenue down to 36th Avenue, Bay Meadows, the Event Center, and the Hillsdale Shopping Center, just to name some of the landmarks. I'm going to highlight the main differences between the 3 alternatives, but in general, you'll see that almost all of the differences are west of the Caltrain tracks. Many of the parcels to the east are either currently under development or recently developed, so those land uses are mostly static across all 3 of the alternatives. So here in alternative A, the Burrell Square Shopping Center is mixed use medium. It includes a privately owned public open space, which is what this sort of green P with a circle around it is here. And that is true across all 3 alternatives. All of them have this privately owned public open space designation. The 25th Avenue corridor here is mixed use low in alternative A. And then Hillsdale Shopping Center is a combination of regional commercial and mixed use medium, again, with that privately owned public open space here. In alternative B, Burrell Square Shopping Center has shifted to residential medium. 25th Avenue gets slightly more dense. It's now a mixed use medium designation on both the north and the south side. And then Hillsdale Shopping Center is still a combination of regional commercial and then a mixed use medium designation. And then lastly, in alternative C, the Burrell Square Shopping Center has shifted to mixed use high, which is this dark blue parcel up here. 25th Avenue still is maintained at a mixed use medium as it was in alternative B. And then Hillsdale Shopping Center is a combination of mixed use medium and mixed use high. And then I put all 3 of these on the same slide, which I think will probably come in handy during our discussion. We can circle back to this slide here, but just to sort of illustrate some of the main differences in terms of the land uses across each of the 3 alternatives. So again, your packet has multiple pages of comments on this study area. It's one of the areas where we had the most feedback, also because it is the largest and sort of contains a number of different current uses. We heard from some a desire to add all types of uses, including residential, mixed use, commercial, along with some comments asking for a lower density option in one of the alternatives. And the primary concerns here, affordable housing, the buffers next to single family neighborhoods, and again, mobility and circulation concerns in this study area in particular. And then my last study area is study area 8. So this, as you can see, it includes the 10192 interchange here, and then many of the adjacent parcels to that interchange. And to highlight the main differences, the parcel north of the San Mateo Marriott is residential across all 3 of the alternatives. It's residential medium in alternative B, but residential low in A and C, and that's currently an office development up here. The designation for Parkside Plaza here is different across all 3 alternatives. So as you can see in alternative A, it's mixed use low. Alternative B is residential medium. And then alternative C is a mixed use medium designation. And then this large parcel just south of 92 on Norfolk is office medium in alternative A, residential low in alternative B, and residential medium in alternative C. So it's different across all 3 of the alternatives. And then this parcel here, which includes the fish market, is designated commercial neighborhood in alternatives A and C. And then in B is a mixed use medium designation. So in terms of community input on this slide, there was a desire from some to look at more mixed use, some high density residential, or even some research and development uses. Others expressed a desire to preserve Parkside Plaza. And there were also a few comments about maintaining waterfront access where the fish market is currently located. So with that, we can move into questions or comments on any of these studies areas. I'm happy to revisit any slides. We can zoom in on particular areas as we go. And just to reiterate once again, the questions we're looking to answer tonight before I open it up. First, is this a representative range of alternatives? If not, what new ideas and changes should we add to ensure we do have a representative range of alternatives? And then finally, do you have any additional ideas or changes to what is included in the packet or the presentation?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know how we can do this where I can see if people raise their hands. I've only got, I guess, 4 people on my screen. So if someone would like to start, why don't you just say, hey, and we'll get started that way.
Hey.
Hey. There you are, Cliff.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to raise a hand there, but I know it's minuscule. I'll start. One thing that is probably better for the summary at the end, but I've participated in some of the public outreach, and it is all of this is sufficiently complex and detailed, even for those of us who are living and breathing it more or less, that I think to really get meaningful public input going forward, even though it's going to take some time, I would strongly suggest we break this into bits, into pieces, so that people can actually weigh in over, you know, my family won't like this, but I'd be happy to participate. It's just, it needs to have more time for people to digest, analyze, and give comments. We zipped through in the couple meetings that I've been involved with, and folks, you know, barely could look at alternative A or B or C in this study area. 15 minutes, we're on to the next. So that's a general comment. But Brian, thank you for your going through these. The only change, something I think that would make this, I don't know, more representative, but I think more practical going forward would be to add more mixed use. And in study area 1, the southern piece, I think could use some more mixed use where we have commercial, you know, all along, including along the rail corridor. You know, I know there's some space limits there, but mixed use does make sense along the rail corridor in a lot of places. And to keep it within your presentation, the other area I would look at is study area 3, also more mixed use along Palm. If you walk that area, as I've tried to do most of these areas, there just seems to be a lot of opportunity along Palm for mixed use. And I would want to add those to those two scenarios where I mentioned, and there are a couple others that'll come up later, with an idea that at least mixed use, and I know we'll have to get into zoning at a later date, much down, when the city gets down to that, those brass tacks, but it just allows more flexibility. And I think market forces will come into play to limit, where it doesn't make sense to have commercial and a mixed use or not. But I'd like to see more of that flexibility. That's my 2 cents at this point.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chair.
Is there a hey from a next person?
I see Rick's hand raised. There you go.
You're muted, Rick.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Brian. First, I have a kind of comment in general about the study areas. This is going to be a matter of continuity because I've been saying this since the beginning. I feel that the study areas as they're laid out are way too restrictive. I don't think they give us enough room to plan to be able to provide equity for all of the people who live and or work in San Mateo. I think that the lack of much involvement of studying the R1 areas preserves the old exclusive bars that kept people from integrating earlier on when our zoning was originally done. The old bar was, of course, the red line. The new bar is the cost of entry. The price is so high that people just can't come near it. So those are my thoughts on the study areas. I think they should be expanded. And I realize the rest of my committee here didn't really feel that way, but I have to state this because I believe this is true, that it's going to be hard for us to, for instance, as we need to, work to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. Just for one thing, let me just comment on that for a minute. How we build and how we live and how we circulate in what are now mostly gasoline-powered vehicles is what's causing our climate change. It's what's causing sea level rise. And we're not really planning to do much here to have any great effect on it because of these limitations. I appreciate that we're looking at the station areas as places to locate some heights and densities. But of course, as anybody who has lived in San Mateo for the last few years knows, that those are hot points of contention. And so that's my feeling on the study areas. We really need to provide more area to work so that we can bring about bigger necessary change. The human beings and all the other species on this planet are facing an existential challenge with climate change. And we have to take steps, sufficient steps to be able to address that. And I think that the delineated study areas are far too restrictive. And I do have some other areas, but I'd like to ask you to go back and you had, I think, 3 areas, 1, 3, and 8. Could you go back to area 1? I'd like to go through the map, the presentation slides as you did and make my comments.
Sure. Happy to do that. So this is the central area of study area 1. So this is the first study area.
Right, from 9th Avenue down to the Burrell Shopping Center.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and so let me make another kind of a general comment. Along with what I think are restrictive study areas, I also feel like if we're going to make measurable change and have any actual effect to make our city more livable and have it be a cleaner and healthier place that's contributing to positive change. And I have to say, I don't know whether you know, but I'm, or everybody knows, but I'm a member of the board of directors at Peninsula Clean Energy. So removing greenhouse gas emissions is really very important to me. It's the reason that I helped create that entity. And so when I look at these, I know that modern development is much more efficient. It uses much less electricity. It's able to use all renewable energy, and it uses much less water than the buildings most of us currently live in. So I do tend to favor the higher end densities and heights in most areas. So as I look at this map, for instance, and I see, oh, by the way, I want to ask you, in B on this map, I see brown areas, and yet I don't see those actually shown in the description.
Yeah, so they are residential high. Looks like that was an oversight. There should be a residential high portion of the key down here, but that's what those are. So 8+ stories of residential.
Okay, good. And then the next in C, that is mixed use, medium, 4 to 7 stories.
Correct.
Okay. And then the dark purple color is office high, 8 stories. Yep. Okay, and that looks like the one there that's around Madison there is an existing facility that already meets that. And the only change there really with that would be at the Burrell Shopping Center. I think that the opportunities to have the most impact and yet contain, what San Mateans would feel is livability in terms of maybe limiting the canyon effect on El Camino, which some people would describe it as, would be alternative C there. And I think that for the reasons I stated previously, I'd like to see those areas expanded. At least one block, or I could say a number of like 500 feet in either direction from El Camino, east and west there. Because it would afford much more opportunity to make bigger and better improvements. You have your next slide, your next area.
Mm-hmm.
This is El Camino Real South. It's the 37th Avenue area. And I know that it's a commercial area now, largely. And then a couple of other areas. The red use, the commercial neighborhood, is pretty much the existing in those areas. Yet it's not really, has not been a very successful commercial area. And I'm looking at, once again, the alternative either B or C. C, the mixed use, might be a better use in my mind for that area where the blue is there in C.
On the south part of 37th Avenue here?
Yes, exactly. Okay. And I think that what I see where FedEx is located there, that's already commercial use and a parking lot. And I think that could actually be improved on. I'd like to see, I think, some housing. Once again, it's a sleepy, tired area that could be put to better use. It's close to a train station. I think some residential there would be a better use. And in that case, I think the alternative, see, these are mix and match, okay? So I think the alternative A would be better for that area, north of 37.
Rick, could I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak.
Yeah.
Could you maybe summarize, and we can come back to you when other people have had a chance to maybe give some general comments?
Yeah. Is that all we're looking for right now, is general comments?
Well, I think so, until I make sure everybody has a chance to ask questions and whatever.
I made my general comments, so thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'll go next.
Heather, great.
Okay, so general comments. I want to second what Cliff said about breaking this into pieces. It may be a lot more meetings, but I listened to some of those public meetings, and it was even now, it's almost impossible to get through all of this. I also want to suggest that when we get into specific comments, maybe we could just do each area separately and not have everyone comment about 138, 138, but like all do one north, one central, one south. I think we'll have a more dynamic conversation. I also wanted to mention, since we're on this study area, that this is kind of right by Hillsdale. So it seems like we should look at this block being largely residential, and that seems to be missing here. We've left commercial here, but it's right by commercial. And then I have a question, and then I'll be done with my general comments. But on the mixed use designation, am I correct in understanding that if it's designated mixed use, a developer could propose an entirely residential building? It doesn't, we're not requiring there to be commercial in that building, correct? It's just possible. Okay.
If I may, through the chair, this is Julia. Yes, I mean, even under current zoning designation, there is that option.
Okay, then I would like to also second Cliff's comment about more mixed use gives us a lot more flexibility in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, you're next.
Thank you. Let me just make sure. Okay, good on that. I just wanted to make sure that I'm addressing the three questions that staff posed for us to make sure they're getting all the information. I think that, yeah, we can go block by block right now, but I think the real question we're answering here is, do these alternatives cover the wide range of options that we have, knowing that we're not going to just choose A, B, or C. We're going to kind of mix match them together. And for me, the answer is yes. I think that our study areas to meet our RHNA requirements are adequately sized enough where we're going to have enough options to play with. And I think staff did a really good job on creating these different alternatives. I did have a few questions here and there that it seemed like option A would be kind of lower height, then B would go up, and then C would go back down, or sometimes it was the opposite. And I didn't quite understand that, but I'm assuming that the idea was just to let us know that we have these alternatives and there's going to be different looks and feel between the vibe that each one will give. So
just to answer that question, I think you may, like for this slide, for example, B actually has the largest increase in population versus A and C.
Yes.
And so what Carrie pointed out earlier was that C is sort of the most growth citywide. You may see some variation from one study area to the next in terms of how that growth is distributed across the city. So in this case, across all of study area 1, which includes like the north to south El Camino, with the exception of some of those other study areas that are interspersed, you'll see that B actually has the most increase in population, but that's not necessarily the case if you look at it on the sort of aggregate at the city level.
Great. And am I on the right track in terms of how to be looking at these? Like, we're not necessarily trying to go block by block, but we're more looking at the bigger picture and saying, like, do we have enough pieces here of the puzzle to piece together the optimal preferred scenario that we're going to be looking at?
I think that yes, you are on the right track in that we want to make sure that at least one of the three alternatives includes sort of a representative outcome for this particular parcel. So it doesn't have to be a perfect alternative. You can mix and match from one alternative and another, but between the three, we want to make sure that we have a representative set of land use possibilities for a given parcel or for a given study area.
Great, thank you. Those are all my comments.
Great, thank you. Is there a hey for the next committee member? Thank you, Ramiro.
Okay, so I want to concur what Eric said. I do believe that area section 1, 3, and 8 are representative of what we can do within that area. I do have a question. Are we also including if we do residential in certain areas to increase open spaces or to provide open space or parks? Or is that, or are we just looking at residential, commercial, mixed use and not looking at expanding open spaces or parks?
So if I may, through the chair, this is Julia again. I think that's certainly something in the next phase of the work that we're doing, which is the technical study. We will be looking at that. I do appreciate you raising that as a comment, and so we will be noting that. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my comments on.
Great, thanks, Ramiro.
Hey.
Hey, Ken.
Sorry, following off of Cliff's. Hey. Sorry, I should maybe just turn this way and you guys, I can look at you while also looking at my screen for the presentation. General comments overall, I think that there is no other additional alternatives to think about. I think you guys have covered all of it. So thank you for that, Brian, for your presentation and everyone else who worked on it. I do have some comments just overall, and I don't know whether or not the inclusion, just one in terms of study area 3, like the Bay Meadows 2 development, is there a reason, like, I mean, it's basically brand new and absent a natural disaster that hopefully will never happen. You know, is there a reason why we'd include those developments in area 3, or are we looking to amend the Bay Meadows plan?
If I may, through the chair again, I can respond to that, if that's okay. This is Julia again. And so the inclusion of certain areas, you know, in the study area is not just on change in land use. One of the key things that we've heard from the community is that circulation is something that's really important. And so connecting, you know, Bay Meadows phase 1, phase 2 to the other side of the railroad tracks, and ensuring that there's multiple layers of looking at, you know, pedestrian, bicyclists, different modes of, you know, connecting people and for people to get around. And so including areas in the study area, you know, where we can see potentially some land use changes on the west side of the railroad tracks, but it's also important to ensure that there's connectivity to the other side.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add to that too, for clarity, that the Bay Meadows specific plan area is the same in all 3 alternatives. So that's a signal that we're not looking at substantial change there, because as you said, Ken, those are very recent investments that have been made that we don't expect to change in the next 20 years.
Thank you. So we're not including them in as part of locations where we could possibly increase housing to meet our RENA numbers then?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Because I just feel like that would be, it just didn't seem right. So overall, so my general comments, so what representative of the range of alternatives, I think you guys got it. I think we're all there. Obviously, study area number 3 is really large. But I think that's just because it covers 2 Caltrain stations and all the TOD development that's happened over the last few years. Just going back to the questions, what ideas and changes should we add or to ensure through the alternatives? One thing that I look at is along the El Camino specifically, is whatever alternative we decide or that we're looking at in terms of the preferred scenario, a lot of it to me, and I know we're going to talk about circulation later on, but a lot of it comes down to more of what we also do with El Camino. And when we talk about becoming more of a walkable, friendly place or being more friendly overall, it kind of goes back to what the Grand Boulevard's old tagline used to be was people-friendly places. And to me, whenever you upzone or you change the designation here to be a higher intensity, unless you're looking at how El Camino functions as a state route and how much really sidewalk width there is, or no bicycle lanes, or how you really are going to try and attract people to El Camino, I have a hard time sort of in some ways thinking about increasing the intensity there without actually connecting it back to the transportation and circulation there. So I know we're going to talk about it later. So maybe that's my comments for later on. But overall, El Camino in area 1, or as it goes down to area 3, that's my general comment is something new. The other thing that would be new just in area number 3 is when I think Rick was talking about the Palm Avenue, Palm Place. You know, I kind of have to get into the nitty gritty here and look at the zoning, and I know that's going to be coming up later on, but the zoning and parking requirements or limitations along El Camino in that one section really limits what can be built there. And so when you have a mixed general plan designation for the lots that are on El Camino and the lots that are on Palm Place, that one area, you're really reducing the amount of development that could actually happen. I would rather see one continuous designation there. So therefore, anyone who comes in who actually wants to develop it could possibly develop and have access for parking or whatever along Palm Place instead of El Camino on that one section between north of 25th Avenue and east of El Camino. So that's the one thing that I think of, because that if you go back to the zoning and everything else, there is a real restriction there in terms of what can and can't be done in that area in terms of those uses. The last thing I want to comment just on area 1 down the southern part is I think we need to look at how, you know, the increased connectivity in Bay Meadows and what it has done with the opening up of 28th Avenue. And when we open up back 25th and 31st, I think that there's a huge connection there for when we look about our land use development and our general plan in terms of connectivity and circulation. And the idea that maybe we look at, and this is again part of a circulation comment, but comments about how like in San Carlos, there's a underground pedestrian bicycle undercrossing under the tracks, which could potentially link the neighborhoods. Because when you think that you don't have a crossing, that's a really long crossing, except for 43rd, from 43rd to 31st, I think it is. And the railroad tracks do become a barrier. So, oh, sorry, last comment is because the train station moved farther north in Bay Meadows, you kind of have to look at those, the Lamps Plus, the old Tower Records property, and you think, how is those maybe not higher in intensity than they're currently listed? If you're really developing it and thinking about building higher intensity along or at the Caltrain stations. So those are my comments. I think overall, I think it's kind of covers everything, but yeah, thanks for that.
Thanks, Ken. So has everyone else on the committee talked except for me? Say hey.
I'd like to add something to my comment.
Okay, can I say something first?
Sure.
Since I haven't had a chance? Okay. So I did want to touch on study area 1 north. And I guess it applies to all of the study areas, not just that one, but it directly affects me. So that's why I focus in on that one. But what are we doing as a city to mitigate the impact of a high density development along El Camino on the properties that touch that new high density development? That's very important to me, both for where I am and as we go down El Camino and on the other side of El Camino from me. So what are we doing to make sure that property values don't suffer for the development? There has to be a happy medium somewhere and some sort of action to take on that. And then on 1 south, there was a mention of historic resources to maintain them. I would say that was a comment that was made in one of the workshops, but that would be something that would apply all up and down if there is such a resource along there. That should apply to all of the study areas. One thing that stood out to me on the rail corridor section was that, you know, I see us jumping in to develop these shopping centers, but if we want to make sure that we're a walkable city and that people in neighborhoods have somewhere to walk to do various things, I'm going to say Heather and Cliff had the great idea, you know, make sure that that is a mixed use development and not just housing, because if we lose our areas to shop, then we have to get in our car to drive somewhere to do it. So that's something that I feel very strongly about. And what I'm not seeing on any of these maps is light industrial. Unless well, it could be that I'm blind and I'm missing the gray, but you know, that's something that if we're going to be walkable, we have to be able to take our car in to have that fixed by a car repair place or whatever. So I'm a little concerned that I don't see that along where we want to develop more and more housing. Light industrial, it doesn't have to be car repair, but just something along those lines. And then a question is, I thought the fish market was in process. So we're talking like it isn't, is it?
If I may, through the chair again, the applicant withdrew for that site.
Okay, so that is now a topic for discussion.
Correct.
Okay, all right, good, glad I asked. Well, and also preserving Parkside Plaza with some kind of shopping options, because I don't want to drive to Redwood City every time I need something. I want my tax dollars to stay here in San Mateo. So those are my general comments at this point. Rick, would you like to circle back?
I just wanted to add some additional general comments. There may be a little bit more to the point and pertinent to the context that has been set out here. I really believe that given the plans that we're looking at, we need to take advantage of the 3 station areas. We're very fortunate in San Mateo to have 3 station areas. And if we do nothing else in those locations, we should look at maximizing our heights and densities in those areas to allow people the best opportunity to be able to live near transit so they can get to and from work. And coincidentally, we should have mixed uses there so that they can be walkable to all the goods and services they need there. I think that's probably the most important thing in the entire plan here. And also, we've talked for a long time about El Camino, and there was actually a process going on that was called the Grand Boulevard Initiative. El Camino needs to be a place where the sidewalks are wide enough, where there's enough visual interest, where it's safe to cross the street. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on El Camino to make it the pedestrian-friendly place where we think people can live and people can shop. So I want to encourage that we do go back to some of those plans that we've looked at in the past regarding El Camino to make it better. Thanks. Those are my comments.
Thank you.
Hi, can I comment on Area 8? I didn't get to speak
Yes,
about, or I didn't
please.
speak about that one. So in Area 8, I want to agree 100% with Ellen that I think we need to make sure there's enough commercial there. It's really an island to get anywhere to shop if we take out all of the shopping there. And also, I think this area really needs some more green space. And I know we talked about that being the next step, but this area really doesn't have much, especially with the water going right through it. So I'd like to see something more than just the one privately owned public access space that is on there in C. Oh, I guess there's 2 of them in C. Oh no, okay. Sorry, I'm a little blind. There's 1 in all of them and 2 in C. So, okay, that's more than I thought there was. So, and then let's see. And then I also wanted to throw in my vote for looking at El Camino Real. This is really broken up, and I think it would help if we had the idea of what we're doing with El Camino Real, I think then maybe the pieces, I think 5 study areas that are along it might make a little bit more sense. So I'm not sure how we do that going forward, but it seems that it does need a direction, not just what we're doing next to the road. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, has everyone sort of said their comments on this particular presentation? Okay, so we're ready to move on to the next one.
So this is Julia again. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Brian, for facilitating that first part. So I think yes, thank you. So I will be covering study areas, the northern segment of study area 1, which is El Camino, downtown, which is study area 4, along San Mateo Drive and Peninsula Avenue, which is study area 5, and then properties that are straddling both sides of Highway 101 in the North Shoreview and Shoreview area, and that's study area 7. Next slide, please. So first, we'll go ahead and talk about study area 1, and this area is generally bounded. It's primarily, again, the northern segment of El Camino, but it's also bounded on the north by Peninsula Avenue and then south by Baldwin. Next slide, please. So one moment, please. There's a few things I like to mention regarding the northern segment here. Some of the key differences among the 3 alternatives are that alternatives A and C include some mixed use, which are the blue colors that are noted in the legend. And alternative B includes a commercial neighborhood, which is the red color. One other thing I like to mention, and you may have noticed this as you were looking at the alternatives, is that the majority of the parcels in all 3 alternatives are shown as residential medium, which is that medium orange color. The residential medium represents a range of net new dwelling units. And so while the color is the same among all 3 alternatives, you'll note that in the table at the bottom that the net new dwelling units are different. So those are some of the key differences. There's a smattering of other uses that are shown in these maps, including mixed use high in alternative C, and then a commercial residential in alternative B. Next slide, please. Study area 1 north, some of the high level community input include adding more high density residential and mixed use, as well as no new development. So there's a range of community comments here. And so one thing I wanted to ask Ellen at this point, if I may, there was a question about maybe splitting up each of the study areas and then having the group discussion, or should I go ahead and just cover all of this 4 study areas and then have group discussion?
Well, I think the concern was that we get through as much as we can in our allotted time. So is this a 30-minute session?
It is.
Okay, so, and we have, did you 4, right? 4, 4, okay. So I would like to hear what you have to say about everything and then do general comments again on them, then go back if people have specific things to say.
Sure.
That way everybody gets a chance and we get a chance to see everything.
Okay, great. I will go ahead and move on to study area 4, which is the downtown area. And just, real quickly, this area is generally bounded by Tilton Avenue to the north, Highway 101 to the east, 9th Avenue to the south, and then properties west of El Camino are also included. Some of the key differences among the 3 alternatives that are shown here, you'll note that alternatives A and B includes more of the mixed use medium, which is that medium color blue. And then alternative C has more of the mixed use high, which is the dark blue color. Additionally, alternative C has more of the residential medium and residential high, and those are the medium orange color and brown colors. And then there is more office high, which is the dark purple color in alternative C. One other thing I'd like to mention, and you may have noticed this as you were looking at the maps, is that all three alternatives show the residential medium, which is again that medium orange color. But then alternative C includes a little bit more of that residential low, which is that lower color, orange color. And then next slide, please. And so some of the high level comments provided by the community for this study area include adding more mixed use, as well as removing mixed use. Again, showing the range of different ideas. There was also similar comments regarding removing residential high and then adding residential high. Additionally, there were some comments regarding adjusting the boundary of the study area to expand the portion that's surrounding the downtown Caltrain area. Next slide, please. So the next study area is study area 5, and this is the Peninsula Avenue area. This area is generally bounded by Peninsula Avenue to the north, Tilton Avenue to the south, and it includes the North San Mateo Drive street. So next slide. So Peninsula Avenue with these three alternatives, some of the key differences are that alternatives B and C have more residential as shown in the residential medium color and the residential high color, which is that medium orange and brown colors. Alternatives B and C have more of the mixed use at the low and medium levels respectively. And then alternatives A and C includes the office low, which is that light blue color. And then next slide, please. And then, so study area 5, some of the high level comments include adding more mixed use development in specific areas and then replacing office low designation with residential or office medium. Next slide, please. So this is study area 7. This is the North Shoreview and Shoreview area, and the area is generally bounded by Peninsula Avenue to the north, North Kingston, and Norfolk to the east, Cary Avenue to the south, and North Humboldt Avenue to the west. This area includes Highway 101, and so it's the properties on both sides of Highway 101. Next slide. So for study area 7, some of the key differences among the three alternatives include alternative A has more commercial service, which is noted in the pink color. Alternatives B and C have more residential, which is shown in the residential medium and residential high colors. And then all three alternatives include some level of mixed use, with mixed use low in alternative A, mixed use medium in alternative B, and a combination of mixed use medium and mixed use high in alternative C. Next slide, please. And so some of the high level comments for this area include changing residential and commercial designations to mixed use, also increasing and reducing amount of housing. So that's, again, a range of different community comments. It also includes adding in commercial only and comments about not allowing residential high. And so that concludes my segment of a general highlight of these 4 study areas. And again, just those 3 questions that are included in your packet are what we're looking for comments from the subcommittee.
Okay. So shall we start with a hey with those of you that would like to speak?
Okay, I'll start since no one
Thank you.
volunteering. To answer your first question, I think this is a great representation of all the alternatives. So I'm going to go one by one. On the study area 1 of Camino South, I would like to see a little bit more, because it is majority residential. I'm looking to see where we can add more mixed use. I think that's gonna be my comment throughout this whole section is where we can increase more mixed use units within the residential, especially on El Camino, as El Camino is one of the biggest corridors for businesses. In the other section, sorry, I'm trying to look through the multiple screens. In study area 4, I think I prefer more of the alternative plan B and C, which has residential anywhere in medium or high east of the actual Caltrain station on that side of the railroad tracks. On Peninsula Avenue on study session 5, I'm leaning more towards having more mixed use throughout on Peninsula, maybe having a combination of B and C, but having more mixed use on that area. I believe right now there are some businesses in that area, so we can do mixed use will be a great achievement there. And as per area 7, I think removing some of the residential units on that side. I think I've taken that street and that tends to be more commercial, so maybe more commercial neighborhoods. I believe there's some actual car dealerships. I'm sorry, not car dealerships, but car mechanics. There's also some pet hospital as well in that area. So try to keep it more commercial and less residential on that side of the expressway. Those are my comments for those 4 sections.
Thank you, Miro. Who's ready to go?
I could go, Ellen.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
Thank you. So these areas, the one north area, I preferred area, I think, alternative C. And there we are. I'm really thinking very critically about our ability to meet the necessary objectives of providing housing and cleaning up our environment. So to me, alternative C works best for that. Looking at area 4, downtown. So downtown is an area where it looks like most of the historic area along 3rd Avenue and B Street is being preserved there. But I really think that a downtown area that is an area that should have heights and densities. It has its own train station. It has all the mixed uses that anybody could possibly want. And it's a vibrant area, and it could be made even more vibrant by adding some density there that would better support the train station and allow for a more sustainable living style there. So I support alternative C there. Number 5, area 5. Area 5 also, when I look at this area along North San Mateo Drive, I have always, I mean, for years, I've seen potential for change and improvement there. Consequently, with my interests that I've already stated, also alternative C looks best to me there. And area 7, please. Yes, area 7 also. While I understand the concerns about saving some of the light industrial uses, I see that along Amplet, some of those areas are changed, more in C than in B, more in E, but clearly, once again, a lot of those uses down there, a lot of Amplet are really sleepy, tired old uses, and we have a greater need for some additional places for people to live. And I have to say that I'm also looking at El Camino becoming a much cleaner place to live with the transition that's going on to electric vehicles. And if you haven't seen this month's current edition of the Climate magazine and the switch to electric vehicles that's going on, you should look at that. You should also look at Peninsula Clean Energy's website about how we're incentivizing purchases of EVs with dollars. And so I also prefer alternative C for Area 7. Thank you.
I could go next, Ellen. Can you hear me okay? Ellen? Oh, you're muted. Okay. Just want to make sure I was not tucked down.
Yeah, I'm yelling at
Okay.
you. Yeah, it's good.
Go, just talk. Okay. Again, I kind of feel like we have a lot to play with here. Not getting into each alternative that I prefer, but I do think there are choices on each alternative that we could choose from. The two areas I'd just like to spend a little bit of time talking about, first would be the downtown area. Yes, that one. I just wanted to make sure that at least in the options that we have, not making any judgment on what they should be at this point, but that their dark blue is covering most of the blocks for if we wanted to have that mixed use high. I'm trying to play like one of these things is not like the other, and I'm trying to make sure that it does, but I think that should be an option that we have, especially if as we do the downtown plan and we have the right design standards. The other areas, it's kind of what the public speaker, Adam Nugent, was talking about on study area 5 and 7. And, you know, we've talked a lot about this area of San Mateo in the past. And I think that it's really important to kind of to zoom in on that area with a little bit more precision than maybe some of the other areas when we're specifically looking at gentrification. And I'm not quite sure. I don't think I understand the underlying factors enough to make any intelligent statements about what that means to these study areas. But I do echo those sentiments, and I think that we need to pay special attention to those study areas, and we need to always have that gentrification lens when we're looking at those two study areas. And those are all my comments.
Thank you, Eric. Who would like to go next?
Hey.
Hey.
Hey. Sorry, Cliff. Just gotta
go for
it. Yeah. So I'm actually okay with everything there. The one comment that I have just in this part is the downtown area. One thing that Rick had mentioned was about the increase in the densities around the Caltrain station. You know, we've used this overall map there. Seems like forever, because that's what is designated as the downtown area, and that's the downtown plan. But when we look at sort of the intensity and densities around the Caltrain station, I feel the one public comment that sort of resonated with me was expand the boundaries to include more of the area close to Caltrain. And I wouldn't really necessarily go too far into like North Central, but when I look at the map and I look at the uses that are currently there, it seems like the existing uses just along North Railroad, just on the east side of the tracks, and that are not including the downtown plan. Yeah, right there where the cursor is in the hand. It seems like there's actually opportunities to develop there, but I bet you because of the way the downtown plan was carved up, that those buildings are non-conforming uses, and they really can't do a whole lot. But it does look like there's opportunity there for additional development that would be, complementary of the downtown plan and the Caltrain station. So no other comments about Peninsula, San Mateo, El Camino, or everything else. I think that's my only comment on this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I guess.
Hey.
Yeah. I'll be brief because my biggest criticism or critique, really, not a criticism, was the same as before, which is to have more opportunity for mixed use. And on all these, with one exception, all seem to have alternatives that have more mixed use. And I'm not going to go down at this point, down to the weeds of which alternative I favor. I wasn't aware that would be part of it. But the one exception is I want to echo Ken's point of view. I've often thought that we do have to be mindful of gentrification impacts on North Central and Central. It just seems the downtown, it really grew up, and we've sort of preserved the focus of west of the railroad, with just the exception of the development that went up along 3rd and 4th. And I think going forward, the east side of downtown is an area that is ripe for development. I mean, there's a lot of odds and ends over there. Some of it historic, some of it not. Some of it residential, some of it not. And then we might want to consider expanding the study area and allowing for mixed use. I think that would be an area that if I was a developer, I would be looking for. And as somebody just looking out for the interests of San Mateans, it seems like that's an area that would be excellent for higher density and mixed use, but some more opportunity for people to live and be able to walk to services and restaurants and enjoy the downtown. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Cliff.
Thank you.
Heather, would you like to make some comments? Okay, I'll go ahead then.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was
Oh.
talking that whole time. Sorry about that. Since
go
we're
ahead.
on the downtown picture slide, I'll start there. I was intrigued by the idea of the super blocks in the circulation, which we may talk about later, but I'm not quite seeing how the circulation connects with this. So maybe in future, I'm sure we'll see more of that detail, but I want to make sure that we have the right mix in that very central downtown, from like B Street to El Camino and 3rd and 4th, that we are looking at the right uses for that kind of super block idea. And so maybe that is a little more higher density mixed use there. And then I also, let's see, I want to move to the 5 and 7 areas. I'm going to second the mixed use discussion again. I think if we want, especially that area to be walkable, we have a lot of single family homes as you get out from El Camino. And I think having a lot more there to walk to is going to be great for getting people out of their cars. So I'm not really seeing enough mixed use there, I guess. And I also think it needs a green space somewhere in there. Maybe it's figuring out a parcel that might work for privately owned public space. I don't see that being there. And then I'm not sure how we deal with this in the general plan, but I know it's kind of going into the public comment about the North Central. Let me say this first. I think that public comment by the resident of North Central and the comment about why we included the Bay Meadows area in the other study area, I really think that neighborhood should be in here, even if we're not looking at changed uses. I think it's really important for that circulation issues that we're talking about. I think it's really connected. And then second on that point, I think this area is really missing an elementary school, and all the kids are getting bused other places. So I don't know how that works with the school district or how we zone for that. But it seems like that is one big if we call it an amenity, but essential service that we're missing in this area. And then on study area 1 North, this might be a little specific, but that old gas station parcel, I'm a little concerned that if we just mark it residential, no one's going to want to build there. So we might want to make sure we consider that the historical use of that property, that we might not want to put a huge residential unit. No one might want to build that there. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. For study area 1, I didn't really have comments on that. It's mostly residential along there anyway, so it makes sense what we're doing in that area. For the downtown area, I guess my feeling is that as long as we are having some level of preservation for the historic buildings, it makes sense to make that a vibrant and walkable area. And I do agree that maybe we need to expand outside of that particular grid and move into more of the circle that goes around the train station. And I was thinking about what Adam Nugent was saying, and I would like to talk to him more about that, because I know it was a large topic of conversation, not to just jump into North Central and make a lot of changes, but I can see where it would make sense to go in there with thoughtful development. And so I would like to see more of that. On study area 5, I do have a question, and maybe staff can help me understand, but how would we make Safeway a mixed use building? And is that the situation where the grocery store is on the bottom level and then it goes up from there? People are nodding. Okay. All right. It's an interesting thought. I can sort of see C better on that one. And then on 7, again, walkability to services, I think is important. And I see that more, well, it's hard because the freeway goes right through there, but I can see along Amplet that there is services in there, but not on the Kingston side. So I just want to make sure that we are continuing to make that available to the residents, because they're pretty far out there. And for some, they would opt to take their car rather than walk that far. So those are my thoughts on that. Would anyone like to make specific comments? And then after that, we're going to take a break. So does anyone have specific comments on these study areas? No? Okay. All right, so we'll finish with this one. It's 8:02 right now. If we can be back by 8:12, that would be great. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, see you in 10. Okay, do I have everybody on? Can't see everybody. Okay, Julia, would you like to get us started on study alternatives 2, 6, 9, and 10?
So I'll go ahead and introduce Linda Lee, who will facilitate this portion of the discussion.
Thank you, Julia. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, members of the General Plan Subcommittee and members of the public for your time tonight and staying with us. My name is Linda Lee. I'm an Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. And tonight I will lead discussion of study areas 2, 6, 9, and 10. This spans the southernmost and west and eastern portions of the city. And with that, I will jump into the first study area. Next slide. Oh, thank you. So study area 2 includes the southernmost portion of El Camino Real from the San Mateo Belmont city border to West 39th Avenue and East 43rd Avenue on the north. This area includes a mix of existing commercial and residential uses. Notable landmarks include the Bel Mateo Bowl and Molly Stone Shopping Center. Next slide, please. Some key differences between the different alternatives. Well, in all alternatives, residential uses are introduced to the Bel Mateo Bowl Shopping Center area. Alternative A represents the least change. Alternative B would consider mixed use low along the east and west side of El Camino Real. And lastly, alternative C would introduce mixed use medium on the west side of El Camino Real, which you see colored blue. Next slide, please. Again, the team has heard a wide range of community input for the study area. Some comments include adding more open space, preserving Molly Stone commercial use, and considering increased amount and density for residential and or mixed use medium within the study area. There were also concerns shared for school capacity, transit, circulation improvements. Next slide, please. Study area 6, the campus area. This is located along State Route 92, the West Hillsdale Boulevard exit area. This includes the Lower Woods Shopping Center, as well as office buildings along Campus Drive. Alternative A represents the least amount of change to the existing office uses. Alternative C would look at changing all office use to residential along Campus Drive while maintaining the Lower Wood Shopping Center neighborhood commercial designation. All alternatives reflect recently approved residential development projects on Campus Drive, such as Peninsula Heights, which you see labeled on each alternative. It's important to note also that this area is subject to potential wildfire hazards. Next slide, please. What we've heard so far for study area 6 is to consider adding more open space, more low to high residential, mixed use, and office, and also expanding the study area boundaries. The team would also like to note that there was a comment raised during the workshops regarding the approved density for Peninsula Heights. Staff were able to confirm that the projected build-out density is actually more consistent with residential low and not medium, as shown in the alternatives. And the general plan team will make this revision in the future updated maps. Next slide, please. Study area 9. This is this Hillsdale Norfolk area. It's located at the 101 Highway East Hillsdale Boulevard exit area. This study area includes the Kaiser Medical Office at Saratoga Drive, Hillsdale Inn, and Marina Plaza Shopping Center at Norfolk Street. Next slide. All alternatives reflect recent and pending residential development projects, such as Hillsdale Inn, the Atria Assisted Living Facility renovation, and Hampton Inn. Some key things to note in terms of differences between the alternatives. B would add the most net new residential units by way of mixed use medium, which is the blue color you see at the Marina Plaza Shopping Center. And then in terms of A and C would maintain the existing commercial designation. Next slide, please. Some new ideas we've heard for this particular study area was to look at varying densities for mixed use and residential, consideration for open space, as well as expanding the study area boundary to include Casa de Campo. And there were also concerns shared for air quality, traffic, transportation improvements, as well as preserving existing businesses. Next slide, please. For this final study area 10, this represents the Bridgepoint Shopping Center. It also includes surrounding offices, commercial, and residential buildings. Next slide, please. For the key differences between the alternatives, A would introduce a small change from office to residential, which you see at the orange parcel to the west along Fashion Island Boulevard. B and C would maintain that existing office use. Other key things to note for the Bridgepoint Shopping Center, as you'll see in A, it would maintain the existing commercial regional designation, whereas B and C would explore a mixed use low designation at the northern portion of that shopping center. And C would look at swapping that to a residential medium use. And of course that alternative C would provide the most net new residential units as a result. Another key note about the study area is that it could be subject to potential flooding from future sea level rise. Next slide, please. So there were a variety of input that we heard. That includes adding more mixed use opportunities, open space, and also expanding the study area to include more nearby offices and residential uses. So this concludes the overview of the study areas 2, 6, 9, and 10. We'll go ahead and open this up to discussion. And again, just to review the key questions, understanding, is this the right or appropriate range of scenarios presented, and whether there are any new ideas or changes that the General Plan Subcommittee would like us to explore.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to make sure we know our time. So is this a 35-minute discussion too, or 30?
Thank you for asking, Chair Mallory. We have about 23 minutes left to go. We allotted 30 minutes for.
Okay, so we have 23 minutes for discussion. So let's do our general comments, as best we can. And then if there's more someone wants to say, we'll add on at the end. Okay, who's going first with a hey?
I can go first.
Okay,
Mallory.
thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to move quickly. I think this one, these series of study areas echoed the loudest to me in terms of making sure that we have enough choices for the mixed use. For example, study area 2, I think that it would at least be worth studying, like where a lot of those with the peach color, the residential low, to make that mixed use low, or for the same reason we had Safeway alternative mixed use. I think that Molly Stone should be mixed use as well. Just at least we have that option. And the same thing for I believe it's study area 10 with the Target and a lot of those areas. I think that it should at least be an option to have the retail on the ground floor, and then we could have some housing above it, just to maximize those opportunities to increase housing. And I do lastly agree with one of the comments that this is one area that I think expanding into some of the adjacent office might be a good idea. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey.
Hey.
I'll go, and I'll be exceedingly brief because Eric just stole all my thunder, and so I will simply concur with what Eric said, particularly study area 2. And I'll add a little tweak up and down Pacific there. I think most people know I'm on the board of Samaritan House, so I'm over there quite a bit. There's a lot of opportunity for mixed use in that area, and which could really help us meet our arena numbers. That's those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff.
I'll go next.
Okay.
Starting with area 2, since it's up, I'm gonna repeat what I've been saying the whole time. We need more green space. So I'd like to see another option, especially on the northeast side. So on the Samaritan House side of the train tracks, I think that's missing some green space there. And then on study area 6, that's the first time I've heard about the wildfire risk there. And so just something we want to be thinking about for the future is, do we want to be putting a whole bunch of residential in areas? So I think I'm sure you're going to be looking at that as part of the next steps, but I'm wondering if we're missing a just less housing, less use of that area, if it is truly in a wildfire risk zone. And then I'm just going to add the green space. It needs more green space in the study area 9. Needs something. Means maybe we can find a parcel to put on some privately owned public access space in either the mixed use commercial area or something like that. Unless oh, it's there. I can't see it on my screen. I'm sorry. It is there in right in C and yes, it is in C and B. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll go, Ellen.
Okay.
So I want to concur with what Eric and Clifford has said, that both study areas 2 and 10 we can do more mixed use, but also think area study area number 9. The same concept that we're looking at Molly Stone's or other grocery stores to do mixed use. We can also do that in the Marina Plaza as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
No comments from me on this one.
No, okay, Ken. Rick, do you want to go?
Yes, I do. I just had to get in touch with my mute. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the comments so far, and I'd like to just a couple of comments on each area because I heard some specific comments. Regards to area 2, I do agree that it should be a mixed use area. It's largely a parking lot right now. And I think there's a great opportunity there. I've been saying this for at least 15 years to make some improvements. I like what Heather said about needing some green space. There is a pretty good sized park down at the east end of Laurie Meadows Road there, but it's you would have to go under the tracks and over. It's quite a walk. If you got a bike, it's accessible. But I think small neighborhood serving green areas are good things to have. And I know that our current practice is that when we do get a proposal for residential buildings or even mixed use sites of any size, we do actually ask them to include green space. Take a look at what's done at Station Park Green, what's being or what is going to be at the Concar mixed use development there. I forget what it's called there. The new one though, that was just approved there on Concar, where Trader Joe's is. They have 4 acres of space, so I think that's good. We should follow along with that. So, and also that area there is served by the bus on El Camino, so you can get to train stations either north or south from there really easily. The bus runs every 15 minutes during commute hours. So, area C, up on the hill. The area is served by a shuttle, and so it has some public transit there. And the shuttles are free to riders. You don't even pay for them as versus the bus. They're free. They're paid for by the employers up there who are there now. That dynamic, I guess, could be changing under some of these scenarios. Regarding the wildfire, yes, I own a property in the wildfire area, and I'm making improvements there. And some of the things you have to do is create a defensible space, and you have to use fire-resistant materials on the exterior of your building, including your roof, your siding, your windows, your doors, everything. I'm fairly certain that that will be required in these areas because of that fire risk. So I'm not too concerned about that, but I think we could stand to see an increase in density up there. There are a lot of great opportunities, beautiful view sites. Area 9, I prefer scenario B there. Because I just feel like there's a good opportunity for some housing there. And some regional uses exist there. The shopping center, I think, is a good, wow, the A, B's, and C's got mixed up there, but I'm assuming the middle one is B. So when I looked at the chart, it just looked like the best mix of uses to me. So then the last is the area 10. And I see that this area has had troubles remaining viable as it exists. Some of the large space leases have gone blank and stayed that way for quite a while. I think it would be good to see some mixed use there. My thinking is that alternative C or something like that, that provides housing. It retains the other area. All the scenarios retain the other area where target is. And I think that the surrounding areas are pretty much unchanged also. So I'm just looking at the area where the Bridgepoint Shopping Center is, and that area I think has to be scenario B there, or C. What is it? Where do those A's, B's, and C's belong there? Are they scrunched up somehow?
You are correct that it's, from left to right, it's A, B,
Okay.
and C.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a
Center
formatting
one,
issue.
Area B, right. And this thing here is also served by a shuttle to get people to the train station or up to El Camino. It's a good area to put in some mixed use there and have some people live there. Not everybody has to drive. So it's a good thing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So on study area 2, I was thinking that the residential low areas could actually become more of a medium type of building because it is close to shopping. Everyone right around there can walk to the grocery store, and I thought that maybe that would be an opportunity to up it to a residential medium. For study area 6, I don't know enough about what the occupancy is of the various office buildings, but if that is dwindling, then I can see an option C where we've got shopping right there and the shuttles, as Rick said. I think that that would work as more development in there. For study area 9, again, the residential low, I could see going up to residential medium in those cases. And then for the Bridgepoint shopping area, I know that that area is an issue. I hate for us to lose, which we don't in any of these scenarios, but lose the ability to shop at some of the stores that are in there. And maybe what happens with B or C is that the area is reapportioned so that the retail establishments there don't have maybe as large a building to deal with. And a lot of times when I see that parking lot, it's mostly empty. So I see that that is a good idea to develop. Maybe mixed use would be the best option there on B. As for the Fashion Island Boulevard, again, if it is a dwindling occupancy, then I get that that might be an option, but I also don't want to see us get rid of all of the office space because it does bring people into San Mateo and they do visit Bridgepoint Plaza. So during the day. Okay, does anyone have any more comments on these study areas? How are we doing for time? Christina, are we doing okay on time?
Sorry, I was muted.
Sorry, Ellen, I have one more comment.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, okay.
But we're good.
Sorry,
We're good.
sorry, Christine. Just to, there was a comment, a community input comment on study area 2 about concerns about school capacity in that area. Considering that the range of new homes is only 280, it's not an issue. Speaking from a school district capacity issue. So just wanted to throw my 2 cents in there.
That's good to know, Ken. Thanks for bringing
Yeah.
that up. Okay. Is that all of our topics?
We have the circulation alternatives.
Oh, the circulation ones are next. Okay, perfect.
And this will be your last.
Okay, and what is our timing on this one?
Well, our meeting is slated to end at 9:30.
And this is our last one?
And this is your last one. So you have enough time to get through this one. And if you needed to circle back on anything, you might want to touch back on.
That's awesome. Okay. Thank you.
And then this is Julia, if I may, through the chair. I wanted to go ahead and introduce Brian Manford and also Zachary Zobel with Nelson Nygaard. And they'll go ahead and facilitate this part of the conversation. So I'll hand it to Brian.
Thanks, Julia. So I'm actually Zach. I'll walk through this, and then Brian will also be able to help answer any questions as he's helped develop these alternatives. And then Brian at the city will handle moving the maps around. So if we can go on A. So I'm going to go over just an overview of the 3 draft circulation alternatives that were developed to incorporate things such as the existing adopted city plans, such as the bicycle master plan and pedestrian master plan, regional transportation projects, such as future Caltrain electrification and modernization, as well as considerations around the reduction of at-grade crossings and regional express lane network, including high occupancy lanes on Highway 101, and then public input from the visioning meetings that have occurred as part of the previous outreach conducted as part of the general plan update process. So I know it's a little hard to see all of this on the screen here, but it is included in the packet materials. Alternative A. So this alternative really focuses on prioritizing what would make the city more walkable. So this focuses on creating alternatives that are closest aligned with the existing bicycle, pedestrian, and transit projects that are already planned by the city. This also focuses on connecting neighborhoods through improved pedestrian routes, increasing access to transit, so trying to address first, last mile connectivity issues, also improving pedestrian access to schools and other amenities that really serve daily life functions. And the pedestrian improvements shown are identified within the pedestrian priority network in the 2012 pedestrian master plan, and can include things such as enhanced lighting, adding missing sidewalks, or replacing deficient sidewalks. And these are shown in the dark blue lines on the map. This also includes improving intersection safety near off-ramps and to make certain areas safer for pedestrians, people with mobility devices. So those areas are the areas that are marked in the blue circles on the map. So this would include widening sidewalks, traffic calming, so improving speed limit compliance and reducing speeds on neighborhood streets, as well as adding some bike lanes and human scale lighting and street trees. Some of the other improvements that are included within this alternative, there's the green line along El Camino Real, and this represents bicycle and pedestrian realm improvements. These are some of the things that we've already talked about tonight. So how do we make the experience more enjoyable and walkable as an activated place? So there'd be things like street furniture, better lighting, landscaping, and street trees, as well as looking at maybe some ideas for parklets or some public activation sites along the roadway. This alternative also envisions a 2-block pedestrian only street in downtown. which would be on B Street. So this would be between First Avenue and 3rd Avenue, which is shown in that light blue line that's on the screen. And then finally, this would also include a new multimodal crossing around Cypress Avenue. It should appear as a dotted red or dark orange line, providing increased connectivity over US 101. So on this map, there's also a couple of improvements that are included in all 3 of the alternatives. The first and foremost would be the solid purple line representing existing bikeways of all types. So this could be anything from a bicycle boulevard or a sharrow painted on the street, or something like even a green painted bike lane. And then the dotted purple lines represent proposed bikeways as identified within the bicycle master plan. There's also the dotted green line, and these represent improvements that are called for in the 2012 wide pedestrian master plan. And then the solid red lines, they may also appear more as dark orange on your screen. These show existing shared bicycle and pedestrian paths, so those kind of off-road facilities. And then the dotted lines in that color show proposed bicycle and pedestrian paths. So moving on to alternative B, this is really focused on prioritizing regional connections. So the goal of this alternative is to leverage the planned Caltrain improvements and enhance access to regional transit options, focusing on connections to the city's 3 Caltrain stations, and also considering potential for higher frequency bus service. So alternative B envisions adding a new shuttle or transit connection between Hillsdale Station and El Camino Real and the study areas 3, 6, and 10 to improve east-west connectivity. And this is shown by the yellow lines that may look gold, yeah, right there. So there's that. And then this alternative also explores the potential for BRT bus rapid transit improvements along El Camino Real. So these could be implemented in a number of ways, or in a kind of gradual implementation. So looking at bus only lanes or signal preemptive treatments to prioritize transit or enhance bus stops that would enable higher frequency of services, lower time between arrivals, and reduce headways. Also looking at station platform designs that would allow lower bus or level boarding to improve accessibility, and as well as faster boarding times. And looking at pre-COVID ridership numbers, the main Samtrans bus route along the corridor had over 13,000 daily weekday boardings. So that's kind of a point to consider as a baseline. And then the third alternative, alternative C. So this is the most ambitious of the alternatives, also likely the highest investment. So this is labeled to support walking, regional connections, and emerging mobility solutions. So this combines the bicycle, pedestrian, and local transit connections that are shown in both alternatives A and B, and explores some additional kind of more innovative urban design concepts, such as what we've labeled as a super block concept for downtown. This idea is based off of places like Barcelona, where the primary idea is that moving through traffic can be achieved on the periphery or the perimeter. There's some limited access points for vehicles that do need to access downtown on more limited interior roadway networks, but really trying to create a more pedestrianized core that also really looks at how we lead the design of spaces around people and human activity as opposed to cars. So kind of allowing for more hybrid of functions in terms of the use of the street itself. And this alternative also envisions a automated microtransit circulator, which could be something like an autonomous vehicle shuttle in the future that would provide access between Caltrain and Camino Real to the study areas 3, 6, and 10 focus areas, again, on the yellow line. And then finally, the green line, as we discussed for El Camino Real, so this would represent bicycle and bus rapid transit improvements, and also considering the public realm to make that a more walkable and inviting environment. And then finally, the same blue circles are representative of areas where there would be proposed pedestrian crossing or safety improvements. And then finally, there's one more slide here, and that summarizes some of the community input. Community input we've received to date around circulation. So as you can see, there's kind of a wide range of alternatives ranging from providing a monorail or people mover along the bay to more simple options such as add more one-way streets. Something that's been discussed a lot would be how to address the crossings for Caltrain, be that an elevated solution along the entire San Mateo corridor. Again, how do we incorporate express bus locations in the alternatives? One thing that come up has been to close B Street to traffic, as well as looking at building a bridge over El Camino Real and Highway 101 to link the marina area, as well as considering enhanced connectivity to the freeways and how we may reduce cut-through traffic, or looking at options for redirecting cut-through traffic for people trying to access Route 92. And then finally, citywide, looking at traffic calming strategies, but one of the areas that popped up in outreach was the area near 25th Avenue and Hillsdale Boulevard. And those are the slides we have for that. Carrie or Julia, I don't know if we want to go back up to the alternatives for discussion or.
So at this point, I think it would make sense to hand the questions portion to Ellen for general questions among the GPS.
Okay. So this is be a question portion, and then we will go to a discussion portion. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay. So does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
And as I'm looking at the maps and I'm seeing El Camino, and we're talking about a lot of improvements, including finally in alternative C, it seems like a lot of improvements along El Camino. When I'm looking at what was shown on the earlier maps as a green dot, which was pedestrian safety improvements, it's actually an alternative A, I think, for circulation, or was that? No, the blue dots, I'm sorry, the blue dots for pedestrian crossing improvements. I don't see any on El Camino, and I think I know why, but I think more people than me need to know why. Can somebody please explain why we're not showing any pedestrian crossing improvements on El Camino?
The alternatives as designed, the crossing improvements in the study areas 8 and 9 are specifically at highway off-ramps. And although El Camino has a lot of traffic, it doesn't have the same off-ramps. But so that's why it wasn't included in the alternatives as envisioned.
Okay, I only bring that up because I hear from people all the time who are afraid to cross El Camino.
Well, yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, and another question I have is, well, maybe this is not, it's a general question, but it's a question I see, it comes up a lot, and I saw it in the notes here too, in the lead up to the meeting. A lot of people want to know who pays for all the infrastructure improvements, the circulation improvements, widening sidewalks, sewers, water, street lights, all the different things. I think I know who pays for that, but I think somebody needs to explain so that the public understands how those things come about.
This is Julia with the city staff, and so I'll go ahead and try to answer for the city, and then also we have Bethany Lopez Lopez from the City of San Mateo's Public Works Department as well. And so just very generally, I think there's a combination of funding sources. Some of it is from new development. And so there's a transportation impact fee. Some of it, the city can go after grants if there is grant funding opportunities available, but those are limited. And then, there are sometimes other, partnership opportunities with other agencies. So for example, I think we partner with Burlingame on a project, on North San Mateo Drive. And so those are additional opportunities. And then Bethany, in case you can elaborate a little bit more.
Sure, that's absolutely correct. We do have various funding sources for all of the different types of infrastructure projects. Julia, you definitely touched on a few of them. There's a few that come from the county, not from the county, but from the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. We received state funding, federal funding for some projects as well. So grants are obviously another opportunity. And then I believe we do get some from our operating budget also. I think we do have a few local city measures as well that's providing funding for some of our street reconstruction also. So yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thanks. And the sewer seems to be a big focus. And I'd like to just mention that the sewer is actually an enterprise. You pay for it on your property tax. Every single building or place that has a sewer hookup pays for the service. So as new buildings are built, they pay to, number one, get a hookup, and number two, they pay every year on their property tax bill to be able to use the service. Okay, that's good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick. Do we have more questions, Eric?
Go, Ellen. Yes.
Great.
Thank you. One question I have is about traffic calming in general, and perhaps lowering the speed limits throughout the city. That's something I'm hearing a lot about from our residents, just making it safer for cyclists, safer for pedestrians, and safer for families crossing the street. Is that captured at all into these scenarios? And is that even in the scope of what we're talking about here when we're talking about circulation?
This is Julia again. So I'll go ahead and start out, and then also loop in Joanna, Carrie, Brian Manford, and Zachary and Bethany as additional, in case I missed something in the response. We are looking, we have received various suggestions in terms of circulation improvements. And so as much as we can, early on when we were developing these maps, we integrated as much as we had heard at that time. Certainly, if there are areas where we missed, this is the opportunity for community, the GPS, basically to provide us those suggestions. And then I'm going to lean toward Joanna, and Carrie if I miss anything.
Sure. Well, I think your question has two pretty different, obviously related, but parts that are treated differently. One is about traffic calming, and the second was about speed limits. So when we think about traffic calming, I think the circulation, that's definitely part of what we can address in the circulation element, and therefore in these circulation alternatives. And right now, the circulation alternative that's most focused on what I would call traffic calming is alternative A, that's really focused on creating walkable communities throughout San Mateo by prioritizing pedestrian improvements and safety improvements. So those are, at least some of those concepts are definitely part of what's in alternative A, as distinguished between alternative B, for example, which focuses more on like regional transit connections. And then when we think about speed limits, Bethany might be better positioned than I am to speak to that, but when there's clearly a dimension of traffic safety and transportation safety that has to do with things like education and enforcement, and the general plan can provide policy support for the city efforts, but general plan's not going to be the place where you set specific traffic enforcement regulations like a speed limit.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Thanks, Eric. Do we have a hey from our remaining people?
I'll say hey.
Hey.
Not sure how, I guess this is kind of similar to one of Eric's questions, especially in the downtown area and other kind of commercial areas. Can we look at variable parking prices and how it influences circulation in those areas?
So I don't know if.
Responder. Go ahead, Christina.
Oh, I was going to say that I'm not sure that we're at that point with this particular exercise, but we can definitely note that as a comment, as something that we keep in mind as we move forward. At this point, I think we're not quite at that stage yet, but we will note the comment.
Okay, and then I guess I'm having a little sort of scratching my head on this component, and I think I need some help on how it fits in. It seems like this is very different than the rest of the study areas, where the study areas kind of just say what can be built. This is really public infrastructure, right? So this is really almost like a master plan in the end. Is that correct, or am I misunderstanding the purpose of this component?
I think that's a great interpretation. That's a really good distinction between some of the most fundamental differences between the land use, which you're right, is mostly going to occur through development on private property by private individuals, versus these types of public or mostly public transportation infrastructure. And so the other difference we already talked about during the presentation is also, that the individual study areas are looking really at specific sites or parcels, and the transportation network, we want to consider that, especially as part of the general plan, as a holistic network, and see how all the pieces fit together and how the transportation network can link all the study areas and all of the other parts of the city by looking at a citywide scale rather than at a study area scale.
Okay, so are we kind of seeing if, are you looking for feedback on what you've missed on sort of the priorities? Because that seems kind of what these three do, is prioritizing pedestrians, prioritizing transportation, and then everything. Is that sort of how this goes? Or are you looking for feedback on like a priority that you're missing, or specific areas of the city that need something?
I think we're looking for both of those kinds of feedback. If there are priorities that are important to you that are not represented by these three alternatives, we definitely want to hear about that. And then if you have specific ideas about how any one of the alternatives could be tweaked to better meet the priorities, or to show a type of project or a type of improvement that you're really interested in having evaluated or considered, we want to hear about that too.
Okay.
If you have a specific idea, we heard in the workshops, for example, about particular places where people want a crossing over 101, for example. That's great. That's fine. We're happy to hear that. And if you think there's even bigger picture concepts that aren't here, we'd love to hear that too.
Okay. I guess then I'll just go ahead with my thoughts on that. I think as a priority, I've heard it so many times throughout this, but just trying to make every part of San Mateo walkable, and really reducing the amount of trips that people have to do in a car within San Mateo, I think is and it's probably, that's leading towards alternate Z, but I think that as a big priority would be my feedback on that. And then specifically, I think I would like to see something, and maybe it's there, but crossings for Caltrain to sort of connect, especially like the 19th Avenue neighborhood to a potential, mixed use area on 17th and B Street, or even to El Camino. I think having that connectivity there would be would be good.
I have another question.
Okay.
For anybody who may be looking at all the proposed work that's laying out here and wondering, wow, how you know, our streets are going to be all dug up and we're going to be having all sorts of traffic diversions and all that. I'd like to see if somebody could maybe help put the public to rest looking at and thinking about this. Give us an idea of over a period of how many decades this work might be able to take place.
So I don't know if our consultants or if our public works staff wants to weigh in a little bit on that. I think that would depend a lot on funding and various factors, the timing to complete projects, funding sources, availability of the resources to do that, and some of the other things that are also happening in the city at the same time. So I don't know if some of our more transportation project experts want to weigh in on that.
I think kind of from an outside perspective. So again, yes, the availability of funding when it comes to grant sources as well as regional projects. One thing, if we're thinking about kind of residential areas, or obviously people are going to be concerned about their streets being torn up, is trying to convey that some of these projects need to happen in terms of the just regular cycle of street maintenance and resurfacing when those things happen, particularly for the bicycle pedestrian improvements. And then also looking at opportunities for sort of quick win treatment. So being able to show where implementation can occur at kind of a high level right away, that's going to make an impact, but may not necessarily be very disruptive when it comes to the actual construction. And then one other thing is, for some of these things, the tie-in to regional transportation projects is obviously a big thing to consider as well.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to add a little perspective too. I was on the Bay Meadows and Transportation Corridor Committee starting back in 2001, which is when we started talking about the Caltrain grade separations, which are just now being completed. I was on the Public Works Commission in 2010 and either 2011 or 2012, as was, I believe, Ken Chin working as a planner at that time when we created the pedestrian master plan, the bicycle master plan, and finally, I believe it was the complete streets master plan. So those plans continue to be slowly in the works. So as you can tell, nothing happens here overnight. The word incremental mentioned earlier on in this meeting tonight. That is how these things happen. So you're not going to see a mass of things, but what you're going to see is steady improvements from this work. So in terms of my preference here, I do think alternative C provides us the broadest set of alternatives to work with. In terms of things like the autonomous vehicle that was mentioned, I believe. That's something that we may or may not see. But I think that we need to also take a look at safety on El Camino. I know I've mentioned it already, but there are some serious issues with people trying to cross El Camino. I get a lot of email about it. And a lot of input. So I would recommend that we think about that more. I know that El Camino is owned by the state. It's a state highway, and that complicates things. But I also know from our changes that we made with the on and off ramps at El Camino that there is some room for cooperation and collaboration there. Those are my comments on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone else that hasn't spoken yet on it want to make any comments?
I want to follow up on a question
Okay.
that Rick had. I understand that we're looking at all these possible future improvements, walkability, El Camino, and majority of it's going to be done by if we find funding. How are specific, let's say hypothetically we find funding for 50%. What do we have a mechanism in place that says, you know what, these are the priority areas that we're going to start first and then work our way down? Because all this construction is consistent on us finding grants, on us finding funding. If we don't find all the funding needed, I'm like, are some of these projects going to be shelved for another time?
Maybe I can answer that, and then I can be corrected by staff, but because I am on what's now called sustainability and infrastructure, it used to be public works, and have been on it for a few years, and we're involved with all these master plans. There are priorities. Some are dictated by the funding source. Some of it's dictated by basically repair schedules. If a road needs to be rebuilt, that's the right time to do the traffic calming and sidewalks and crosswalks and so forth. And some of it is staff priorities, but a lot of it comes through the commission and up to council occasionally. I think that sort of answers that.
Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, it'd be wonderful to do it all. Hope that helps a little, Ramiro. And maybe a segue into my very brief comments. I support the most fulsome. I recognize, as Rick and others have pointed out, that this is a 20-year, some of it's pie in the sky, but a lot of it's guardrails and guides. And I think we need to think big and be hopeful. That's kind of what the general plan is, at least in part, about. Increasing walkability, bicycle paths, ability to move around, anything that gets us out of our cars, as well as the ability for people to get out of town when they have to without having to cut through neighborhoods, is a real plus. Not only, I think it's an end in and of itself, but it also helps, quite frankly, to blunt or address some of the challenges that are going to be raised and have been raised by our residents when we talk about increasing housing. We have to increase housing. It's the right thing to do, as well as meeting state mandates. And of course, it raises infrastructure issues. And doing some of these things really addresses some of those issues and makes the whole thing more palatable, as well as making the city more livable. Just one small example. I don't know if anybody has spent any time on North San Mateo Drive recently. It has been, they call it a traffic diet, which I think is a funny term, but basically it's been thinned out. So there are fewer lanes, and more bicycle lane, and there's more parking. It's night and day. So much easier to go north and south, and all those sort of things will make biking something that we do in our household that much easier. The ability to get downtown without having to drive and park, even in an electric vehicle, is a plus. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Cliff. Ken, do you?
Could I add to what Cliff just said about North San Mateo Drive?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Because what you see there also on the corners, what look like bulb outs at the intersections, are actually stormwater treatment facilities. They capture the stormwater and they filter it before it gets into the pipes and goes to the creek or the bay. And that's part of how we're required by the state statutory requirement to treat our stormwater, which we're doing increasingly. So those are actually a great thing. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
So I wasn't sure whether we had stopped with the clarifying questions and moving into comments. So should I just
But you can sort of do both.
Yeah. So I don't have any clarifying questions. I love the conversations. Rick did call me out earlier. So I do have history, a lot of history on this. The San Mateo Drive, it was called a road diet is the technical term. Yes. And that was the first project in the Sustainable Streets Plan. So, which was the Complete Streets Plan, which Rick mentioned. So,
2011 or 2012.
Yeah. So I'm glad all this stuff is happening. Just for some clarifying things before I get into my comments, I made the comment earlier about the sort of undercrossing for ped and bikes, like San Carlos has. I missed it, and so I want to correct it. I'm really glad that it's shown on all 3 alternatives on 39th Avenue. So it shows that there is a crossing there, a proposed crossing, which would be fantastic. Secondly, there is a mistake. You're missing the class 2 or maybe class 4, maybe. Well, now it depends on how you classify it. bicycle facilities or bicycle lanes on El Camino underneath 92. So going from those, you probably want to update the map there because there are bicycle lanes on El Camino, which is a big project when we did the 92 El Camino interchange upgrade. Lastly, just in terms of going back to connectivity on my comments, one of the things when we're looking at circulation, if for some reason we go back to pre-COVID times and all the traffic and everything else, I have to look at Fiesta Gardens and the Fiesta neighborhood and think about the PM traffic and how landlocked that neighborhood is. And if you go back to the original Bay Meadows and the designs, there used to be an outlet there, a connection. And when there's a comment about a one-way, street or so, there is an ability there in Fiesta to provide sort of one-way access and allow the neighbors to kind of get out, improve the overall traffic circulation in that area, especially in the afternoon, and not not address sort of the cut-through freeway traffic that the neighbors there are all deeply afraid of. So connectivity is huge. So the 39th Avenue, Fiesta Gardens is a big thing, just in terms of how we improve circulation throughout the district. I mean, throughout the city. Sorry, Ellen, you got that. So my overall comment, just to respond two other comments relating to what Eric said. Eric, it's about the speed limits. There is a provision within California Vehicle Code that allows the cities to reduce speed limits around schools. And if you guys are looking to do that, the school district would definitely partner with you on that. City of Burlingame reduced it around all of their schools. And so if you're actually ever looking to increase the safety and we talk about safe routes to schools, that is one way to do it around schools. Rick, your comment about, or question about how long would it actually take? Knowing the city, knowing the funding and everything else, you're looking at, if we go with alternative C, I mean, you're looking at 40 plus years, to be honest.
That's why I asked in decades, could they?
Yes, it's in decades. Now, unless funding changes, unless something happens and, the city decides to put more money into pet and bike stuff, I mean, honestly speaking, you're looking at 40 years. To go over to committee member Mario's comment about the priorities, there are priorities in the pedestrian and bicycle master plans in terms of which projects should theoretically go first if funding was available. All of this kind of comes down to my overall comment, which is just like what Heather was talking about, how this is somewhat disconnected. It really is. The idea that we're talking about the general plan, but the circulation element and the land use element, they're two different elements. They are required by the state, but it's a sort of antiquated view of how we deal with development and the quality of life in our cities. And you're looking at how land use on private property and circulation and transportation on public property, and they're two separate silos. And so my overall comment is, when we look at this and we look at the different areas and the 8 or 10 different areas that we have, eventually what I hope would happen is that when the general plan starts to come together, you go back to the sort of precedents of the old general plan, and you have these areas, these land use areas that are back in the back of the land use element. And you might say, well, instead of just a land use area, maybe it's a plan area, and so it incorporates not only the future intensity or land use changes, but also the circulation and transportation changes that would be recommended. So you look at it as a whole rather than two separate pieces. Because again, the way we're looking at it, the way every city is looking at it, is it's back into the old school mentality of, these are the 7 elements that you look at in general plan, just like the housing element is a separate element. They're all separate, but they're all connected. And the fact that we're dealing them within silos is difficult. And so when you kind of go back to it, they're all connected, and that's sort of my pitch. So I'll stop talking there, but this is obviously a topic that I have lots of comments on. So that's it for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. I'm really glad you brought up Fiesta Gardens, because that is a gridlock location. So yes, there definitely needs to be more focus on that. And also in North Shoreview, that's also has had issues for the residents not being able to get out of their driveways. And I notice there's just a lot less going on in the northeastern part of the city as far as dots and lines. So I just wondered why we aren't addressing issues that I know exist over there to the extent we're doing it in the western part of the city. If anyone can speak to that.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. A lot of the lines that you see on the map are from the adopted plans. And so it's one reflecting adopted pedestrian and bicycle master plans. And then the other focus was on improving things for the whole city, but also making sure the study areas where the most growth is going to take place are well served by improvements in connectivity. And so in the Northeast, part of that was a new overcrossing at Cypress to link things together, and then the planned, or in this case, existing bike and trail network.
Okay. I'd like to see a little more going on up there.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the comment.
Okay, those were only my comments. Thanks everyone on all those.
Chair Mallory, I had some comments too.
Wonderful. Okay, yeah, Eric, go ahead.
Just very quickly.
That's fine.
One, I just wanted to echo Rick's comments about crossing El Camino. I think the same people are probably contacting me as well, but that's an issue all the way from Peninsula all the way down to Belmont. It's like we're trying to connect our neighborhoods to other amenities across El Camino, and families do not feel like they can cross it safely. So that's something that I think that I would like to see, like little dots showing like a enhanced crosswalk or something like that on El Camino. And given the challenges with being a state route, I would still like to put the focus on that. Also, too, I just wanted to make a quick comment about the concept of super blocks. I love the concept, not too fond of the name, but I think that we should continue looking at those because that could really make a difference in our downtown. That's all my comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Does anyone else have anything to say?
Yeah, I could add one thing.
Okay.
Regarding water infrastructure, that's all owned by the California Water Service Company. They're happy to build whatever we need to build to serve any property that needs water service. The question also, of course, is the drought, the availability of water. I could speak to somewhat the use of water. Modern, efficient buildings use so much less water than living in the East Bay or in the Valley, where they have older buildings that don't have modern, efficient appliances, and many of ours don't either, but they're getting upgraded because people have more wealth here. And they also have huge yards out there. They're dusty and dry, but they have fruit trees. And they have different things that they're watering that people here don't necessarily have in these new multifamily mixed use kind of settings that we're talking about. So there's a big difference. Water goes a lot farther here. In fact, if you check the actual usage rates, people that live here use less than half of the water that people on the other side of the bay use and going farther east. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, I have one more.
No, please.
So Fiesta Gardens was brought up and I wanted to second that, especially because that is a district-wide school. And I think we really do need to have a component for the safe routes to school here, especially for Fiesta Gardens and College Park. And I'm probably missing, and Ken can probably say which ones are district-wide schools, but those, we really need to be getting people, you know, from all of San Mateo to those places without having to drive if they can avoid it. So I'd like to see a safe routes to school component here.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you to staff and to our Nelson Nygaard attendees for putting all this together for us. It was a lot to go through, but I think we were successful in maybe the tip of the iceberg, I'd say. Okay. So our next order of business is reports and announcements. Does anyone on the committee have anything they want to say or announce?
Oh, Chair Mallory, this is Julia.
Yes,
if I
Julia.
may, I wanted to hand the mic back to Carrie Stone
Oh, okay.
to kind of wrap up and talk about the next steps.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you for jumping in.
Julia, I think that I was just going to do these last 2 slides. I think I can handle it. But I think that's what Carrie was expecting.
Okay.
So yes, thank you. We just want to wrap up quickly by reminding everybody about the next steps and just letting everybody know that with this meeting and all of the meetings, the materials are available on strivesanmateo.org. And if you have any questions or comments at any time, you can reach us at generalplan@cityofsanmateo.org. So we're going to continue this discussion of the alternatives at more public meetings coming up with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So the Planning Commission meeting is going to be on Tuesday, July 7th, 7 p.m. And the council meeting, at the time we published this slide, we weren't sure about the date, but it's looking like that is shaping up to be part of the August 17th. Am I 17th or
16th?
16th. Okay, sorry. August 16th, regular meeting. August 16th, Monday, August 16th, 7 p.m. regular City Council meeting. So we're gonna be having a similar discussion with the Planning Commission and with the Council to walk through the alternatives, share the input that we've been hearing, and get their feedback, and then ultimately Council direction. And so the goal would be that at that August 16th Council meeting, we get some final direction on the range of alternatives, and then we move forward with the evaluation. And then we'll have much more information to share about how these different alternatives might perform and their pros and cons. I think is there one? No, that's it. Okay.
So handing it back to Ellen.
Okay. Thank you, Joanna. Okay, reports and announcements. Does anyone on the committee have anything they need to report or announce? Nope. Okay. Then we will adjourn the meeting at 9:20. Thank you, everybody.